We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Antry and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. And this week, earlier on in the week, I was preparing for what was going to be a happy intro for me. I am still happy to report that my aunt, who I've spoken about, she's fully moved into residential care now. What most people would call a care home, but fully moved in and settled. She's actually doing quite well there. I've noticed already just having been there about a week and a half, 2 weeks, since she's getting regular physiotherapy, regular occupational therapist comes by, doctor's visits every week, and that, like, her left side was definitely weaker than her right side. That's why I always suspected she had a stroke, but apparently she didn't, according to all the tests. But just her ability to lift her left leg now and stuff, it has visibly improved. Nice. Just with regular attention and that being paid. So I'm happy about that. And then the other part of it was getting her apartment completely cleared out, because she was in independent living prior to this. It was a retirement place, but it was just an apartment that she was renting. So having all of that moved out, the things that she wants to keep, which is pretty much everything she had, now in storage, since there's nowhere to put it in her new living quarters. But that all completed as of last Friday. And so I was very, very pleased about that, and I was all ready to celebrate on the podcast. But then Saturday rolled around, and I
got some texts.
Tom got some texts.
I got a few texts on Saturday.
You might remember that. What was it? 3 weeks ago? 4 weeks ago now? Something like that. End of February, anyway.
Has it only been that long? It feels like a lifetime ago, Rob. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah, I had reported how there was a drain pipe goes from the roof above me, just for rainwater off of the roof. But that drain pipe goes through a column in my living room, and it had sprung a leak where there was a little compression fitting on the inside, and it was spraying water inside of that column, and it leaked out all over my floor and everything like that. So as part of the repair, they had put in a new clean out on that, so that now you could snake down more easily than having to go onto the roof and all that sort of thing. So Saturday, moments after I returned back home, which is kind of fortunate, all things considered, that drain pipe cap, from the pressure that had built up inside of the clog that had not been properly cleared out the previous time in February, it exploded. It sounded like a gunshot inside of that column in my living room. And, all the water that had built up from the roof above me in the pipe sitting above that clean out point, plus the pressure that had built up below it, all entered my apartment at once.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well,
the last one was like a spraying of a leak that had sprung in the coupling inside. So, I mean, it was water. It was not great.
The last one was a preview, and this was the main event.
Yeah, this was all of that all at once. Why not?
Why not?
So, I mean, basically about the same amount of my floor covered in water, but now all at once. And so plumbers were not on site this Saturday, as they had been the last time. I was not quite as fortunate as that. So, bailing as much water with just towels off of the floor as I could to try and mitigate as much damage as I could. Now, the good news is no equipment or furniture damaged. It was the same section of floor which had been cleared already anyway, although slightly bigger puddle than last time because it was all at once. But yeah, if I was debating whether to replace some of the floorboards last time from the rather minimal amount of water damage that the laminate flooring had suffered, there's really no question about it this time. Double soaked, double cupped, a little bit of bubbling here and there, so that's going to definitely have to be replaced and repaired this time. So yeah, that was my weekend. I know it's not nearly as bad as what many people are suffering throughout the world right now. So I'm not gonna say that, but nevertheless, It wasn't what I was looking forward to. It wasn't the plan for this week. And then my computer decided to do a massive update this morning, which it still hasn't completed. And we're just trying to get the heck out of here in some kind of timely fashion. So if this all crashes and never sees the light of day, it won't be a surprise. How are you doing, Tom?
We'll just be talking to each other.
That's what it is.
I'm in the middle of 2 different spring breaks. So my middle son was on spring break last week, and my other 2 sons are on spring break this week.
Okay.
So last week, we had the one son home, and now the other one is, and because my youngest son is home and my wife is at work. And I have today off. I don't work on Tuesdays.
Okay.
I get to take him to a bunch of doctor's appointments, so I have to leave.
Okay. Yeah.
I have to be someplace at 1, and we usually finish this podcast at 12, and I need to eat and corral him, who will almost certainly get, what? We have to go? What? And then I'll have to get him to eat something and then brush his teeth. I have to brush my teeth.
Is this your youngest son or is this your middle son or oldest son?
My youngest son.
Yes.
He's 15.
So he's not college age yet, though. So
he's not, but he also doesn't act high school age either. So we're gonna be corralling him a little bit as we deal with his ADHD brain.
Even at college age, if you still had to wrangle him, it wouldn't be that much of a surprise. It's a little bit more acceptable when it's still before college age.
We actually last week, my wife and I left on like a weekend. We're gonna go run some errands. You guys, we'll see you in a little bit. And we were gone for hours, and we came back, and I looked in the kitchen. I was like, "Did you guys not do anything while we were gone? Did you move?" They're like, "Oh yeah, I had some lunch." I'm like, "Yeah, I can tell. The kitchen's wrecked."
Well, there you go.
Well, I didn't know if the dishes in the dishwasher were clean or not, so I didn't want to do any. I'm like,
there's no way to check. There's no way to tell.
I'm going to murder you people.
Well, with that bit of...
You are about to be 19 years old.
Yep.
What is your excuse?
With that bit of catch up, we got lots of questions this week, and we do have Tom needing to get out of here and starting late. So, let's crack into it.
All right, so you watched something, a couple of somethings.
Yeah.
I didn't watch anything, so let's just kill that one. Actually, I will take it back.
Okay.
I started watching The Golden Girls with my wife. She was like, "Why are we watching this?" I'm like, "Because I need some levity in my life right now. Thank you very much.
Simpler time,
levity." Yeah,
and good writing. Yeah, that show had really good writing.
Yeah, it starts off a little bit on the homophobic side, but we'll see where it goes.
I can't say that I watched it from the beginning or anything like that. So that's not shocking. I was just going to quickly mention I have been watching Invincible. Season 3 is what's on right now.
I didn't watch season 2. I'm so sorry to say. I really like that show. I loved season 1.
So, season 1 was very, very strong, and that was following the very first arc from the comic books and reasonably closely. Season 2 was definitely a step back. They kind of slowed down. They separated everybody, which is pretty common for things to do in a season 2. But it didn't feel as focused. It didn't feel as though it was as pre-planned and sort of edited ahead of time as season 1 had been, which is very common for shows going into seasons 2. So I'm happy to report that season 3, I think, is closer to a return to form. It's a little bit more focused story, although it's still quite spread out, but it just feels more cohesive this time than season 2 did. Season 2, I was a little bit, sort of stepping away from it, but season 3 has pulled me back in. I will say, though, since they aren't under the time constraint of being a broadcast show, and they're sort of allowed to have whatever kind of random runtime that they want to have, there is the definite feeling of like, okay, like, let's make it a little snappier. Can we speed it up a little bit? There's some gaps between dialogue, which honestly, I guess they're going for kind of more realism to real life, but this is an animated show, and we're just used to animated shows going at a faster clip in general, compared to
the X-Men show on Disney Plus. They were like, it was like, I hate you, but I want to be your friend. We're best friends now. Like, Jesus.
I don't necessarily mean story beats going that fast. Just literal dialogue is typically spoken more quickly in animation than it is in live action, which is typically faster than things go in real life. So for this animated show to be kind of doing the speaking pace of real life, it just feels slow. And then this animation has never been like the highest quality and certainly not high frame rate animation. So there's many instances where, just to kind of save on the budget, it's kind of a still frame. And so you'll have a section where somebody's speaking to someone, and instead of animating the person who's speaking, you're seeing the reactions of the person who's listening, but their reaction is a still image of a face, which is kind of like not necessarily the most, interesting thing to be looking at. And
like,
then,
imagine if we were trying to make Arcane, and instead of a big budget, we just didn't. Yeah. We didn't have that. So we're not going to do a bunch of like subtle facial changes.
Right.
We're just going to show the person. There they are. That's who they're talking to.
That's who it is. So, I have my
Use your imagination, Mr. Rogers.
I have my little criticisms of Invincible, but I am enjoying the third season overall. Like I say, it's a bit more of a return to form. So if you were a little put off by season 2, it's worth coming back for season 3. I'm liking it. It's not quite wrapped up yet. I think there's one more episode that still needs to air. This is all on Amazon Prime. So then also on Amazon Prime, I watched another A24 movie, but this is going back a ways. I think this was either 2018 or 2019. So it's actually kind of before the modern era of A24. But it's a movie called High Life, starring Robert Pattinson. He's kind of almost the only person on screen because most of the screen time that he shares is with a baby, like a literal baby infant. Obviously the infant is not having dialogue with Robert Pattinson, although it could. It's a sci-fi movie, this. But this is written and directed by Claire Denis. You'd know her from Chocolat. That was sort of the most famous movie that she did. French language in that. But this
was she in the movie, or was she just?
No, she's the writer-director. She's the writer-director. And so this movie, I would say, in order for you to enjoy it, you do kind of need to prepare yourself for what you're going in for, because this. This movie does have a plot. It's told.
It's interesting that you have to specify
right,
that.
Yeah. It's told out of sequence. Plenty of flashbacks. Plenty of trying to kind of piece together what's being told to you. And like I say, like there is a plot to this movie, but that really isn't the point of this movie. The point of this movie is it's a meditation on sort of these philosophical questions of to what extent would your humanity potentially devolve? What taboos would you potentially be willing to enact given an extreme situation? So this is a sci-fi situation of a very small group of young people who have been put onto, I guess you would have to call it an interstellar spacecraft, which is just going at constant acceleration towards the closest black hole to Earth. So the constant acceleration is how you have artificial gravity, because it's just constantly accelerating. So everything it's and similar to The Expanse, the design of the building is basically just a skyscraper out in space, because it doesn't need to be aerodynamic. You just make a rectangle, and the opposite the direction that you're accelerating, that feels like down to everybody who's inside.
Right, sure.
Those types of ideas were kind of interesting to see. Ostensibly the notion is that they're being sent up there to more or less find out if it's possible to form a stable orbit around this black hole for the purposes of generating energy, which I have no idea how that energy would get back to Earth, because it's supposed to be there to serve humanity. But as we discover, that supposed mission is not really the mission, and these people are more or less.
Somebody sucked me in a rocket and said, "We're going to shoot you towards a black hole." I'd be like, I feel like you don't like me.
Yeah, these people are more or less just being experimented on, and but like I say, all of that kind of sounds like kind of interesting sci-fi plot, and it is, but that's all very much in the background. This is a thematic movie. This is, like I say, just sort of examining, like, okay, to what extent would humans maybe go? Like I say, what type of taboos might you end up doing if you're in this, very long, very isolated situation where who's really going to judge you? There's no one else but yourself. What actions of other people that normally wouldn't go in society?
Somebody just hands them a baby? Is that...
yeah, kind of. I don't want to give away too much, because that's kind of the only interesting part of this movie, is discovering it as it goes along.
I guess. Whatever.
So
tell you what, when you said meditation on, you lost me immediately.
Right. So
like that was the last that I listened.
This movie is bleak. This movie is dour. If you are sleepy, this movie will put you to sleep. There is the constant low-level drone of the sound of the ship in the background at all times, so it acts like white noise. And it is slow, and there's barely any dialogue. And so, yeah, I mean, you got to know what type of movie you're getting into, because if you were looking for a fun sci-fi romp or something like that, this surely is not it. And it's not, like I say, it's not about it doesn't have some kind of conclusive ending where you find out, what happened to everybody or whether they succeeded in the supposed mission or the secret mission or any of that. Like, that's not what it's about. It's purely about theme and examining humanity. And given that it was 2018, 2019, this is one of those movies where it's kind of like, well, we kind of know the answer to a bunch of these questions now, and it's not terribly positive outcomes, because we've seen humanity go through this in real life now, and we know that we kind of know the answer to these questions that this movie is asking about some things, and it's really not a mystery anymore. So I mean, that's not the movie's fault. It came out when it came out, before a bunch of things happened. Like people being forced to be isolated when they weren't used to that before. That sort of thing. Right. So, yeah. Anyway, that was High Life. I'm not thumbs down on it, but I'm not thumbs up. It's a very thumbs in the middle type of one for me, and you've got to be in the right mood to watch it. Okay. Mm-hmm.
That sounds very fascinating. Yeah, like I said, I didn't really watch anything. We looked at the little Golden Girls. I did not watch any more Daredevil. I haven't any time, but the kids are home, and that we're on top of each other in this place. So, not that anybody, I mean, every once in a while people ask kind of about like what the update with the house is, and it's just, it's little bits of news. Okay. So to give you kind of the grand overview, if I had a motto in life, and I can't say that I do, but if I did, it is that you never say no until you can't say yes.
Okay. Interesting.
So you always, you try to stay open to all possibilities until you absolutely can't anymore for whatever reason. And I was not like that all my life, but I, especially not younger in my 20s, but as I've aged, that's kind of been my motto. And that's sort of what we've been doing with this house. So we are pursuing all avenues. Like if somebody walked up to me and said, here's a stack of money, I want your house, I'd be like, pfft.
Yeah, that'd be one of the easier decisions, probably.
That would be a pretty easy decision. But so, we've talked about splitting the lot, which we are pursuing. We've talked about, which I haven't talked about in this podcast because it just happened recently, raising the house, which is an alternative. We're now pursuing that. We're also pursuing, building a new house or rebuilding the house as is, which that is almost rebuilding the house and then moving back in it is almost certainly
off the table.
We can't say yes to that anymore. And I think it's because of, the kind of the direction that the laws are going and the stuff.
That's kind of the only one that the insurance would go for, right? Is just rebuilding the house.
Well, they've
as
already
it was.
given us the money. What money we're going to get from insurance we've already got. Whether or not we use it to rebuild the house is immaterial to them. That's
very different from the way insurance works in my place, but okay.
Well, if we want the house to be insured again, we have to do it. Right. But if we do not use that money to rebuild that house, then that house is uninsurable as far as they're concerned.
I see.
So yes. So that's kind of where we are. So we're still pursuing. We're still going forward. We're getting some good news, some bad news, little things, that sort of thing. Like if we're raising the house, we were like, okay, well, if we do end up deciding to raise the house, we need some place to live because raising a house does not happen overnight. No. And there's a lot of call for it in this area. A lot of people are trying to do it.
Yeah.
And it takes a while to happen. Well, so our thought was, hey, well, we could just, rebuild it, make it livable so that we can move in and then they could raise the house. And it doesn't take a huge amount of time to raise a house, but getting everything prepared to raise the house is what takes so much time. And then getting on the schedule and everything else. And we were like, well, we'll just rebuild the house and then we can move in and then they'll raise it when it's time. And they won't let you do that.
Okay. Okay. Well, there you go. That's one.
If you
one
rebuild
option.
the house and then they raise it, then the grant money or whatever the amount of money that the state or the government or whatever will give you to help do that, they don't want to risk the house getting damaged in the raise. So you have to raise it first and then rebuild it, which is probably not going to work for us because we can't afford to live in this apartment forever.
Okay.
Anyways, with this AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. To get your question answered, all you have to do is ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. You go to the website and find our shows, our show notes, our Flickr albums, so you can follow along with the pictures, any links to products or articles that we talk about, and older shows. So if you want to go back and search for a different topic that we may have covered, and they'll be in there, and there'll be timestamps too for Rob puts those in there.
Yes, I do.
Let's see, facebook.com/AVRant podcast, youtube.com/AVRant. Contact Rob directly, rob@avrant.com. His socials is at First Reflect. I'm Tom at avrant.com. I do not do socials that much.
That's right.
Though you can find me on Blue Sky.
Yep.
I don't post anything, but this automatically posts to Blue Sky at
Okay.
Mr. Namas at Blue Sky or whatever the hell it is. I don't remember what it is. Anyways. Thank our listeners of the week. Become a listener of the week. Support the podcast in some way. One of the ways to do that is go to avrant.com, click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, and send us a PayPal donation. We want to thank Sasi for doing that this week. Sasi apparently got a new job.
Oh,
and,
okay.
And I don't want to reveal too much because I don't know how much of his note that he sent me he wanted me to mention, but he got a new job, and we've answered all the questions for him over the years, and he's like, now that I'm flush with cash, I'm going to give some to you, and that's great. Sasi, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sasi. That's very kind of you, and we appreciate that financial support via PayPal.
Yes, and we want to thank our if you want to support us monthly, but I'm sorry, I am very distracted because it's the time of the year where the bugs are like, oh, it's warming up a little bit, and I've gotten annihilated by bugs, and I am itchy as hell.
Oh, I see.
Right now,
that's what's going on.
It's driving me nuts. I'm trying not to scratch all my mosquito bites, but I have so many. They love me. Like, have you ever met somebody who's like the only person in the room that's getting bit by mosquitoes? That's me.
You're the one? Okay.
All right. If you want to support us monthly, you can do that through patreon.com/AVRant podcast. We have 131 patrons currently. Patreon takes whatever money you dictate, I think a minimum of $1, and give most of it to us. So thank you to our 131 patrons.
Yeah, for sure. That is patreon.com/AVRant podcast if you'd like to sign up to make an automatic monthly donation. So a big thank you to our 131 patrons over there.
Okay, if you can't support us financially, do something to support us or something and let us know what it is, and we will mention you here. We got an email from Tim that kindly offered to send me a PS3 for my autistic brother if he needs one, because I kind of mentioned it in the podcast.
It has been mentioned,
I wasn't sure what my parents were doing about that, if they had saved that stuff or whatever, and I thought I might have a PS3 kind of tucked away at home, though I don't think I do. So Tim offered to send me one, and then so I reached out to my parents, and they said that he has stopped. I mean, obviously he doesn't have one anymore, but before that, he'd even really kind of slowed down on playing the PS3 because he's autistic, and he cannot not 100% complete games. So, and he likes platformers. I mean, that's the kind of games he plays. He doesn't do online games, obviously. But so he would get like Spyro the Dragon or, whatever, and have to 100% complete everything. And if he couldn't 100% complete it, it was very frustrating to him. And then, deleterious to everybody in the family because he would just be agitated all the time. So they had kind of steered him away, and he had kind of migrated towards games on his phone, which he is playing more often, which have like achievements that you get that are like daily, that sort of thing, and he can get those fairly easily. So yes, they said no thank you to the PS3, but Tim, thank you very much for offering.
It's very nice of Tim to think of that. So thank you, Tim, for that offer. That's very nice of you.
Very much appreciated. That's very kind. Tom, not me, different Tom. He noticed me joking about AVRant listeners doing a buy a brick sponsorship to rebuild my house after the hurricanes, but of course that's Not what's going to be happening, but whatever. But from the sounds of things, rebuilding the house might not be the plan anymore, right? Yes, well, there you go. You just heard it. But for real, what about doing a buy a panel pledge drive to help Tom and his family raise some funds? This other Tom was thinking I could gather up the names of all the donors and have them printed on the custom art panel from, say, like Acoustimac or GIK. It might make for some very cool looking absorption panel. And once I have finished, I have a proper home theater again, to be a nice way to remember all the AVRant listeners who donated to help out. It's not a bad idea. I don't mind that. Once we know exactly what we're doing and we can do something like that, I think that would be great. I mean, the money would be we wouldn't have to do it until I had like an actual room where I could put a panel behind me.
That would be
what I would think is I get like a 2x4 panel, and then I don't want to say sell, but like people could sponsor a little spot on it, and then we could figure out a way to put their names on it,
it's
or
a
put their
virtual
logo
brick,
or whatever
a printed
they want.
brick.
Right. So that would be kind of fun. So that's actually a good idea, Tom.
Nice.
So thank you very much. We will keep that in mind.
Yeah, I like that idea.
So we got some notes of gratitude, notes of podcast for keeping the gratitude going. Notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going from Raph, Gurinder, Julian, Joshua, Brandon. Will Rob's advice to Americans have to come with tariffs now? Yes, that's right.
I mean, I wouldn't be the one enacting it. If Tom enacts tariffs on Canadian advice, giving advice to Canadians, then I'll just have to counterattack. That's the way that'll go.
That's definitely going to happen.
The American's always going to move first.
Yannick, we mentioned that we might rebrand when we get to episode 1,000, right? What about the name AV Flood, since we seem to be experts in both AV and flooding, not necessarily by choice? And Rob did say that he sent this in before any knowledge of this new leak that just happened.
Yeah, I saw that. I think on the Sunday. I was like, well, isn't that timely? I didn't know. That could be appropriate. I don't actually mind the name AV Flood. That might not be bad.
That might not be bad at this point. Sasi, Tom T, which is the Tom we just mentioned, and David. So there's Raph, Gurinder, Julian, Joshua, Brandon, Yanick, Sasi, Tom, and David. Thank you for thanking us.
Yeah, and I'll say those names one more time so they came from my lips. That was Raph, Gurinder, Julian, Joshua, Brandon, Yanick, Sasi, Tom, and David. Thank you all very much for your notes of gratitude and encouragement. We definitely appreciate them. And a big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
Let's see here. In the news, do you recall the rumors of an imminent Sonos streaming box codenamed Pinewood? Tech reporters have seen it behind closed doors. It was in beta testing for several months. Sonos was expected to finally announce it next month. Well, it's completely canceled now. The new interim CEO of Sonos, Tom Conrad, informed employees during a recent all-hands meeting. No one has ever gone to an all-hands meeting and thought, boy, I'm glad I was here. No one ever came away going, this is edifying. That they would no longer be pursuing video at all anymore, and he will instead reprioritize repairing their damaged reputation by fixing their app and focusing on audio. Pinewood was going to use a new OS based on Android that was developed by an advertising company, The Trade Desk. And it was supposedly going to have a universal search that actually included Netflix. Plus, it was going to be an HDMI switch and allow for new surround speaker configurations using various Sonos speakers, all for a price between $200 and $400, but not anymore. It has been shelved, and
so, I mean, normal folks out there who aren't following tech news and speaker news will have no idea that this thing was ever even a glimmer in someone's eye. Because it never was officially announced. So it's not as though it's like a product cancellation of something people were pre-ordering or anything like that. It wasn't like even a Kickstarter or something, you know? So, I mean, you can't really say, like, it's kind of a no harm, no foul in this case. I mean, there were some people who knew about the rumors and might have been looking forward to it, and maybe they're disappointed, but this wasn't like a officially announced product that has, now been canceled and pulled back or something like that. So, but nevertheless, we had mentioned this as a rumor category. It seemed like a certainty, like everything was moving towards it. Reporters had seen the thing in action in real life, so it wasn't like vaporware of something that had been talked about but was only a theory or a concept. It's like, no, this really existed. People had worked on this for a couple of years. It was in beta, so this is a pretty last minute cancellation, but I don't necessarily think it's the wrong move. It's like, Sonos needs to get back to being Sonos and get that good reputation back, because they have damaged
I think that this product could come out a year from now or 2 years from now and still be a viable product anyway. So unless somebody comes out with something that's the same. I mean, even then,
I don't see streaming services going away, so there could be another time to launch this in the future.
Yeah, I don't necessarily like. This is not the same as like taking the Batwoman or whatever movie that was, and just like deciding, hey, we're going to write this one off.
Yeah, no, this was not a tax write-off reason. This is a change of direction because they're under new management.
And even under, like I said, even if this came out, 2 or 3 years from now, it would still be a viable product for them that they could, improve upon over this time and then release it.
Hey, maybe
later.
they can slap HDMI 2.2 in it and be the first to market with an HDMI 2.2 device.
Got this from Karl. Other than specialty brands like Revon and Magnetar, there haven't been any new Ultra HD Blu-ray player models released for years now, and Samsung and LG have completely discontinued all of their Blu-ray and Ultra HD Blu-ray players now. So it was quite the surprise to see Sony announce a refreshed Ultra HD Blu-ray player model in May, the new X700K, or Dash K, or Slash K.
Slash K,
will replace the original X700 model, but they are stripping that thing bare. No more Wi-Fi, no more built-in streaming whatsoever, and it still has an Ethernet jack, but that's strictly for firmware updates. It does still have 2 HDMI outputs in case you need separate audio and video feeds for much older AV receivers, and there's a digital coax audio jack, but no optical jack. It still supports both HDR10 Plus and Dolby Vision, but it isn't clear whether you still have to manually turn Dolby Vision on or off. With no auto detection and switching. Don't hold your breath. And the price went up 25%, at least in Japan. So you're getting less for more, but at least it exists.
Yeah. My theory is that all the optical drives they had ordered for PlayStation 5s, and then when they removed the optical drives from the PlayStation 5 Pro, they're like, hey, we got a bunch of drives left over. Let's throw them in the cheapest case possible with nothing else in it, and we'll just say we have a new Ultra HD Blu-ray player. Why not?
So sticking with Sony, they invited the press out to Tokyo, where they showed off their upcoming 2026 flagship TV. It's the RGB mini LED backlighting. Just like Hisense and TCL, Sony's 75-inch prototype was using nearly 4,000 zones of local dimming to deliver 4,000 peaks, and each of those zones contains 8 clusters of individually dimmable red, green, and blue mini LEDs, so it's not entirely wrong to claim between 11 and 12,000 dimmable backlights. Compared to Hisense's prototype, which was shown at CES, and remains the only RGB mini LED TV scheduled to ship in 2025, Sony's claimed advantage is their processing and experience with LGB lighting ever since their Triluminos days. Whatever. I know what I'm doing. With 22-bit processing for each color backlight and then a genuine 10-bit LCD panel over that, Sony is claiming considerably more precise control over their version of RGB mini LED backlighting, and they can also reroute the power from the individual backlights that are not being used at a given moment to further boost peak brightness. Like a turbocharger for the light, whatever.
They're like, hey, the electricity's not being used over here. Let's use it over there.
Attendees say there was still visible blooming around small, bright objects, but now that blooming can have a tinge of color to it instead of always just being white halos. So that's an improvement, I guess. So the claim is that the color-tinged blooming looks more natural and therefore less distracting. I guess we'll find out in 2026. Whatever. Just get an OLED. It's dumb.
Yeah, so I mean, the one thing that I do have to be on their side on is that because they were asked, are you planning to have another OLED series as your flagship, which they did not rule out, but they were pretty adamant that, in 2026, this RGB mini LED backlighting behind an LCD panel, that's going to be their flagship technology. And what did make sense is they said, with this technology, first of all, they can have brighter full screen brightness than any OLED can deliver. And that is, we know, factual from all the other examples from other brands out there. But also just that they can make larger screen sizes at lower prices than they can with OLED. And I don't think there's any denying that either. And all the trends are that consumers are going for larger and larger screen sizes. So when you can get the 75, the 85, the 98-inch screen sizes, it is difficult for OLED to compete at those screen sizes. Price for price. So that's where I do think it does make sense for them to be pursuing this.
Big.
Yeah.
Big I can get behind. trying to convince me that you're better in some way is where I get whatever. Comments. Raf in Australia asked last week about using the parametric EQ that's built into his pair of tone winner subwoofers to manually boost, to add a boost and center it around 50 hertz after having run Odyssey. We said we could play bass sweeps to figure out if the dips that Odyssey showed in its before graph were just some destructive interference that could be filled in using EQ, or if they were full-on cancellations that would never be that EQ would never be able to fill. Happily, using that method, he was able to determine that the dip at 20 hertz and the dip at 50 hertz are not room modes in his case. Mm-hmm. So via pure trial and error, using our suggestion to start with a larger manual EQ boost and work his way down, he settled on boosting 20 hertz by 6 dB and boosting 50 hertz with a Q value of 3.0 by 3.5 dB.
Mm-hmm.
Again,
very precise.
After... Yeah, 3.5. It's the 0.5 that made all the difference. Again, this is after Odyssey supposedly flattened the native frequency response of his pair of subs in his room, and he's quite happy with the results. Maybe he doesn't actually need bigger subs after all. We might be onto something.
Yeah.
Everybody's so surprised.
No, but
the owner of the bike shop asked me yesterday about which TV he should buy, and then as I started to answer him, he immediately talked over the top of me the entire time. I was like, okay, so you just want to tell me which TV you're going to get.
What do you have in mind? Yup, that's the right one. But I'm really happy that that procedure worked out for you. That you're like, oh yeah, that's he was showing a dip right at 50 hertz initially. Odyssey is doing what it can to fill that in to make it perfectly flat. But with this mild hump, it's not a gigantic hump. 3.5 dB centered at 50 hertz and then tapering down on either side of 50 hertz. So between 40 and 60 hertz is being boosted. But he's like, yeah, that's giving me that little bit of extra kick. It's feeling good. And then right down at 20 hertz, a nice 6 dB bump, which is in line with sort of what we'd expect just from natural room gain anyway. But Odyssey is correcting that to be kind of ruler flat down there. So that's not unusual either. It makes very good sense what you've hit on there via trial and error. I like that.
And one last thing, the dip that Odyssey showed for his subwoofers in the before graph of the 100 hertz, that one doesn't seem to be an actual room mode.
That does seem to be an
does seem to be actual room mode with a crossover frequency of 80 hertz to his speakers. It doesn't seem to be a problem once the subwoofers and the speakers are playing together. So all good, right?
Yeah. I'd say so. Yeah,
that's how
for
that
sure.
goes.
And I mean, this is now you're at the stage where, because we know he's been interested looking into this stuff, considering measurements, all that type of thing. Like this is the one where you kind of got to make a decision because you've reached, according to your ears, really pleasing, nice response. You're like, I really like the way this sounds. But there's that analytical side of many of our brains, of us folks who consider home theater our hobby, where we're like, but I want to see it on a graph, and it is only going to show you things that will make you worry that you almost certainly can't hear, because if you could hear them, you would have just heard them with everything you went through, with your trial and error process, which probably had you listening more carefully than if it was just completely casual listening to normal content, right? This was sweeps. I am sure that you were listening more carefully in what you just did. So I'm going to try to encourage you to actually enjoy what you have now. But if you cannot possibly put aside that analytical side of your brain, it's not like we're going to blame you. We will totally understand.
That's right. Gurinder has some bad news to share. He was thinking that he was strangely able to localize one of his two SVS PB13 Ultra subs at the back of the room, which wasn't normally the case. It turned out he was correct, and the PB13 Ultra at the front of his room wasn't making any sound. He did a quick bump test with a 9-volt battery, and the driver was still responding just fine. The amp's indicator light comes on, but there's no sound. Excuse me. He actually had the same symptoms on his other PB13 Ultra a few years ago, back then the amp needed to be replaced. He contacted SVS and they confirmed he'll need another new amp, but being in Canada, that sort of thing is handled by their official Canadian distributor. And since he's out of warranty now, unfortunately, there's a cost for the replacement amp as well as shipping costs. So it's going to be around $700 Canadian, which is like $3.50 American.
A little bit more than that, but it is less in US dollars. That is true.
It's all said and done. Not ideal, but he's still a whole lot less than buying a new sub of similar size and output level. Of course, this all had to happen right when he was finally had the house to himself for an evening. He was going to run a full Odyssey calibration.
Foiled.
His youngest child also wanted to watch Godzilla King of the Monsters, and when Gurinder said they should wait until both subwoofers were working again, he said he should go ahead and watch it with just the one sub. What are these kids coming to, huh?
Yes.
Yeah, whatever, dude. Just watch it with just one sub. It's fine.
I'm pretty sure they did. But yeah.
Eliezer, it's been a long time since we've heard from Eliezer. He says he's a bit behind on listening to our episodes, but he wanted to mention the V-Moda faders for passive hearing protection. He's been happy with them. Those have been around, right? I think they've been
That
around.
rings a bell. Yeah. I do remember V-Moda having passive earplugs for sure.
He admits they aren't as good as the Etymotics, but he thinks they are good enough, and he finds them a lot more comfortable, which is the main thing. He did discover that he needs to use 2 different ear tips. His left and right ear canals are not the same size. Me too.
Yep. Yeah, I don't mind that recommendation.
Anything's better than nothing.
Well, yeah, definitely. Yeah, and them being comfortable enough for you to wear the entire time that you're in the loud environment is very, very important. I have to go purely by memory, which obviously could be very faulty, but when I was doing comparison of hearing plugs for myself, like I ended up on the Etymotics. I'm luckily not bothered by their physical fit. I don't find them super uncomfortable. I'm pretty used to having something in my ear at all times, so it doesn't bother me too much. So I went with the Etymotics, but so my recollection of the V-Moda faders was that they weren't as neutral, that I could tell I was wearing earplugs, like not just that things were quieter, just that the quality of the sound had changed with them in. Which happens to some extent with the Etymotics too. I mean, you've got a plug in your ear. The sound is going to change a little bit, but I was kind of pleasantly surprised with the Etymotics by how little the tone of the sound changed. It still sounded much like the same music, just quieter, which is what I was definitely hoping for. So with the V-Modas, I didn't have that same experience myself, my recollection of it anyway. That's why I didn't choose them. But yeah, we are definitely in agreement that if they're the ones that are comfortable for you to wear, it's much better to have them than not.
Sasi heard John from Ireland was asking about potential subwoofer options. Sasi has spent time living in Europe and the UK in the past, so he agrees that BK Electronics is a solid recommendation. But shipping between UK and Ireland, despite how close they are geographically, is not as easy as one might think, and it's actually easier to ship into Ireland from just about any other country that is still a member of the EU. So he suggested considering Tone Winner subwoofers, which are priced quite a bit lower than SVS over there, or possibly XTZ, who offer at least one 12-inch dual-ported 700-watt model with built-in PEQ and genuine minus 3 dB 20 hertz extension as an option.
Yeah, so I had, last time when we spoke to John from Ireland, considered the Tone Winners, but I was sort of looking at the setup and the things that he was talking about. I'm like, I don't know if he wants ones as physically big as, because Tone Winner subs, I don't mind their performance. They're very good value, but they have gone for using physics on their side, which is if you want to keep the price of a sub that can play low and loud, if you want to keep the price down, you make a big cabinet. And that's what Tone Winner has done. And yeah, they are huge. They are really, really big cabinets on those. So I was just kind of looking at what John already had and the other ones he had expressed interest in. And I'm like, I don't quite think he's going for that ginormous size, and BK Electronics has ones that are a little bit more compact while still having really good performance and extension to them. So that's where I was coming from there. But yeah, I agree. They are certainly a very good value choice, and if John is comfortable with the physical size, then that would be fine. That particular XTZ 12-inch, and I'll say Z because over in Ireland they say Z like we do here in Canada. Particular XTZ.
I like Z. I also like H quite a bit.
Right. We don't say that one. But the 12-incher, the dual-ported one, it's also a big boy. XTZ has gone with, we're going to have a big cabinet so that we can reach low and loud without having to make the price exorbitant. So both of them are sort of in that ballpark. But yeah, if the size is acceptable, I agree. Those are good options.
Let's get to our questions here. David, after our enthusiastic recommendation, he's been keen to get a 98-inch TCL QM851G, but he got it stuck in his head that he wants it at the lowest price he ever saw it selling for back in January, which was $3,000. Mm-hmm. And now that model is either out of stock or only available at a price higher than that. So is there another 98-inch TCL model coming out soon to replace it? Anything within a few months? He's fine waiting. Or should he pounce on the QM851G at $4,000 since he sometimes sees it available at that higher price?
Right.
So you and I live in the same stupid world where if we even hear of a price that's lower than the price that we're seeing, we're like, oh, just throwing money away.
And it's that thing where if you bought it already and then you see it on sale later, you're kind of angry about it. All right.
Yeah. So I'm with you, and I have to fight this all the time and just realize, like, for instance, my cycling, I have a very stupid cycling helmet. I have the ones that look like the track ones, or the triathlete ones, where the visor is connected to it.
Yeah.
It's not teardrop; it's a regular shaped helmet, but it has like a visor attached, which other cyclists think is lame, and cyclists as a whole are lame. Okay, so when the lame people look at you going, "That's lame," it's super lame. Anyways, I dropped it, and most cyclists, at least roadies, who are the worst, if you drop your helmet, you got to buy a new one. First of all, I'm not buying a new helmet because I dropped it. Shut up. They're like hundreds of dollars. I am not buying another helmet just because I dropped
compromised,
it 2 feet.
Could be.
I don't care. My brain's not that important. But I dropped it right on the visor and it cracked. Yeah. So I went online and I was like, I don't want to order from Amazon because Jeff Bezos isn't, because of Jeff Bezos. And so it wasn't there anyways. So I went to the website of the manufacturer, and the visor was like $1 million. It was like 61% off or something like that, which was like great. Yeah. But then it was $10 shipping. I was like, no. But then the whole price with shipping and tax and everything was still less than the MSRP from before. And I was just like, but the $10 shipping is so much for a little piece of nothing that's going to weigh nothing. And
wait till you see what we have to pay for shipping for acoustic panels in Canada. Man, that sets you back. It literally doubles the price, whether you're ordering it from the States or from the Canadian manufacturers. Like double the price to get your acoustic panels in Canada. That's why I'm a fan of the kits that flat pack it. But going back to the original question about the QM851G from TCL. So that model is discontinued, not being manufactured, and there is no stock replenishment coming of the QM851Gs. That's according to Value Electronics, who's pretty on top of these sorts of things and a little bit more forthcoming about situations like that than most other retailers. So it's very nice to have their information available. But they're like, there's no stock replenishments coming. It appears that Best Buy kind of got the last container of those 98-inch QM851Gs, because at the moment we're recording this, they still have it available to purchase, but at the $4,000 price, not the lowest it ever was, which was $3,000.
That's a lot more, though. I mean, $4,000, it's like 33%.
Oh, yeah. But like the original MSRP on that was $6,000. So even the $4,000 price, like when it got down to $4,000 on sale last year, I was recommending it frequently. I'm like, hop on it at $4,000. That's a really good price for a 98-inch flagship level TV. You can't beat it at $4,000. $3,000 was crazy, but it was only at that price for a very short amount of time, and was basically the final clear out of that was going on.
I'm with you, man. I would have a hard time spending $4,000 on something.
I know.
I could have gotten for $3,000 a little while ago.
Sure. But point being, given how well that model has sold, given how quickly it's sold out of stock every time it's come into stock, and that was like throughout the year. That was when it was at $5,000, and then especially at $4,000. So I wouldn't be waiting like for the 851G to get back down to $3,000. No, look, I'm sure if you watch it like a hawk, you're going to be able to come back to me at some time later in 2025 and be like, I paid attention to every retailer in existence, and I eventually tracked one down in October of 2025 for $3,000 because it did exist. Someone out there had one. Like, I'm sure if you went to that level that is possible to do, but I'm just saying the likelihood of like Amazon or Best Buy just having it on sale for $3,000 again, I am very doubtful of that. I think it'll sell out at the current $4,000 last gasp, no replenishment coming. So if you were okay with $4,000 before, it's still a flagship level TV that you can have right now. But if you were like $3,000 was the threshold, well, the QM7K for 2025, it just came out. Now that is a series down, right? That's the 7 series instead of the 8 series. It is replacing the 751 from last year.
Sure.
And it's right now $4,000 because it is not on clearance, because it's a brand new model, and it's
going to go on sale one day, David. And when it goes on sale,
Now, yes.
And you'll look back at this $4,000 that you just paid for it and go, oh no.
Well, the QM7K is definitely going to hit $3,000 at some point later this year. And if it goes by the same price pattern as the QM751K from the year prior, it might get down to $2,000 at the very last gasp just after Black Friday, the January sale that we saw like on these. Now, is there a QM8K coming? Well, we can't say for 100% sure because DCL hasn't officially said it, but yes, there is a QM8K coming. And it is going to have an MSRP of $6,000 just like the QM851G did, and it is going to get down to $4,000 at some point, and maybe it'll hit $3,000 in January of 2026. The pattern on TCL's pricing, I'm not expecting to vary wildly, although who knows, the tariffs might make everything more expensive if that continues on. But that's like the roadmap for what's coming. It's fairly predictable from TCL. So now it's just a question. The QM7K, by all accounts from the early reviews, well, not reviews, but previews that have seen it, they're like, okay, so it's a little step down from the 851G. We kind of expect that it's a series down, but it's a step up from last year's 751G. The 751G was like a little step down from 2023's 850G, but it was a step up from the previous 7 series. So the new QM7K, it's pretty much the equivalent now of the 2023 850G. You know, everything's kind of shifted up there. So it's like a little step back from 2024's 851, but it's pretty much the equivalent of 2023's 850. And the 850 was never a slouch. It remains a really, really good TV, and that's pretty much what the QM7K is now equivalent to. So if this is about I've got to hit $3,000, you're going to be able to get the QM7K for $3,000, not right now, but if you wait a few months, it is going to go on sale for $3,000. I have almost no doubt of that. If, however, you're like, I want as good as I can possibly get for $4,000, then I would go ahead and snap up an 851 right now because they're not going to last.
All right. Dazz. First up, Dazz just wanted to comment that he appreciates all the combination, appreciates what the combination of an Apple TV 4K and connected AirPod Pro 2 earphones can offer. Dazz or his wife will sometimes use that in their bedroom Nook TV area while the other person is sleeping. And thanks to spatial audio processing, it does a convincing job of making it sound like the speakers are stationary at the front of the setup rather than sounding like everything is inside your head, or that the speakers move along with your head whenever you turn. It's actually a pretty cool feature, he thinks.
Yeah.
Spatial. That's like literally the only use for spatial audio. There's no other. The way that spatial audio is implemented, as far as I'm concerned, there's just no other reason to ever use it.
I would say,
other than if you're watching a screen across the room.
That's right. I would say it takes a little bit of getting used to, because I think, well, for those of us who are used to wearing headphones frequently, it's like, I don't know what you would call it. It's not exactly muscle memory, but you do just get used to the sensation of what it's like, because you are aware that you have something in your ears, so your brain is just kind of expecting a certain sort of experience. So the very first time that you do turn your head and you are aware that you have earphones in, but the sound kind of stays locked to the location of the TV screen. And I will say it's not quite perfect, so it doesn't perfectly replicate just listening to speakers and not having earphones in. So there's a little bit of cognitive dissonance that you got to get used to. But once you are used to it, I do think it's a pretty cool effect.
Yeah. Now he continues to be interested in what his teenagers, junior and senior years of high school age, and their friends all think about home audio and what they want if and when they have houses of their own. Mm-hmm. They aren't happy that almost all living rooms in their area still have fireplaces, and that the only place it seems like a TV is meant to go is directly above said fireplace. I agree. Mm-hmm. First of all, anyone who builds a home in Florida with a fireplace deserves the whatever happens to them, because it's a terrible, I mean, why? And it's funny too, because there'll be like 1 or 2 cold days of the year, even when it was particularly cold this winter, and you would still only, I think maybe only 2 or 3 times I was like driving around or walking around or cycling around and went, oh, somebody's got their fireplace going, you can smell it. But generally speaking, no. But if that is going to be the case, they do want good sounding speakers, but they do not want to see those speakers or take up any floor space. He saw one solution of mounting 5 smaller speakers on the ceiling. Probably not what we recommend though, right? Yeah, that's called Bose. So what would be our recommendation for an entry-level integrated speaker setup for younger folks who are dealing with these difficult living rooms.
Yeah, like I'm sorry, the images that he showed, I'm like, I find that uglier than a nice pair of speakers on either side of the fireplace. Like, you can get some, they're not going to be invisible, but you could get a pair of nice looking speakers that go on either side of the fireplace and the TV. And I would much rather do that. And I'd be, like if I'm starting out, I've got a limited budget and I care about the aesthetics and all that, I would certainly take good stereo sound over worrying about surround sound. That would be the trade-off I would be willing to make anytime. And
because those little speakers don't have a subwoofer anywhere in this room.
And I would take that. I would take the good stereo sound over a sound bar as well. I think that's the superior experience of a nice looking, good pair of speakers standing on either side of the TV. So that's my genuine recommendation there. But if this is someone who's like, they really are looking for surround sound, but they want it to be affordable, they want it to be, I can't say literally invisible, that's maybe asking a bit much, but having options for stuff that either looks nice the way it is or in-wall options, right? Because in-wall and in-ceiling are definitely the way that you're going to hide them most. Overall, I'm going to point them to RSL. I think the value that RSL is offering is pretty darn hard to beat these days. And then they have very good in-wall and in-ceiling speaker options from the same company that, like, there's a lot of companies where they're in-wall and they're in speakers. They don't really match up with their bookshelf and floor standing speakers. RSL doesn't even have floor standing speakers, but like they really don't match up with their bookshelf speakers. They're like kind of designed by two completely different teams, or maybe it's even like an OEM and they're just putting their badge on it type of thing. Yeah. But RSLs, it's all the same components, it's all their same design, and they really do timbre match and work well together. So maybe you have a center and a pair of bookshelf speakers up front, but your surrounds are in ceilings. Like that totally makes sense, and that can satisfy the aesthetic concerns. And RSL can do all of that, sound really good for what I think is a pretty darn affordable price. Plus, they have absolutely my favorite value in subwoofers as well. So, that's like, to me, the easy answer. Like, hey, just because, look, a lot of people are not going to know about RSL. They're not sold in any stores. They don't advertise. So you're only going to hear about it from someone who's into this hobby. So I think that's a great one to tell younger folks about, because there's almost no chance that they found it by accident, right? It's really, really hard to come across that company that way. So that's where I point you. I really like that they have this limited time right now white finish offering as well, because that can really help on the aesthetic side if they are using in-room speakers. I don't know how long those are going to last, but at least right now you can get them in either a black or a white finish, and a choice of grill colors too, which can really help. So that's my easy recommendation there. I would point young folks to that all day long right now.
So in the bike world, I deal with people who come in all the time and they're like, I have a bad back. First of all, everybody's got a bad, everyone has a bad back. Nobody can ride a bike because of their back. I don't know why they're shopping for bikes, but they can't ride them because of their backs. These same people will have bikes. I will see them ride their bikes and they'll be hunched over like you cannot believe, because a bike is too small for them or whatever, too long for them or too something. And they've got the seat too low or the handlebars too low or something. It's ludicrous. But their backs are terrible, and they won't even look at a bike that's a road bike because of that. Okay. They won't look at it. But at the same time, if you see them on their bike, you're in the same position. You would be in the same position on this road bike as you. In fact, you would be in the more comfortable position if I got you an endurance road bike versus the POS thing that you got from Walmart.
That's not what they're picturing in their mind.
This is the same thing that happens. What's that?
That's not what they're picturing in their mind, though, and that's the problem.
Exactly. And this is the same thing that happens with speakers. People have decided that speakers look a certain way, and I think that the way that they look is like a big box Kenwood from like Sears catalog circa 1985.
And even if you're not picturing
they look like.
That big and blocky, if you just like speakers are big black rectangles, I couldn't blame people for that, because many speakers are pretty darn big plain black rectangles. That's not untrue.
It is impossible for me to believe that that you could not find speakers that you would think were aesthetically pleasing enough or were invisible enough in your room if you actually spent 5 minutes looking for them.
Obviously, when price is a very strong factor, though, that sometimes does play into it for sure. Finding
but architectural speakers are going to be cheaper than. I mean, you have to install them in your ceiling or whatever. It's. I mean, they're like, oh, I just put a speaker up there on the ceiling like these other guys. These are great. Yeah, okay. Listen, this is the first floor. How are you running the speaker wire up there? How are you doing all these things? And, oh, it just looks good. I'm like, shut up. I don't know what you're talking about. So yes, my argument to people who are like, I don't like speakers in my room, and my mom's the same way. I've fought with her for years about it, and she's just decided she doesn't like speakers.
Sure,
that's fine. She also doesn't like the way her room reverberates, but she doesn't do anything about it because she refuses to even entertain the idea of putting acoustic panels on the wall. No matter if they match the paint or not, she just doesn't want it. She just doesn't want them up there. I don't want those things up there. I'm like, okay, why? Well, because I don't have any room for it. It's going to look weird. You haven't even tried. Anyways, so yes, I don't come to me and say that you want to have good sound and then be unwilling to in any way entertain solutions that give you good sound. If that's what you're going to do, you honestly don't deserve surround sound because you don't want it. You don't want it. And that's what I mean, that's fine. You like people who come in and refuse to entertain or to listen to us about what's going on with their bike or what kind of bike they should be buying don't deserve to be comfortable on the bike. They're just going to go out there and buy the cheapest bike they can and then say, I don't really like cycling. And they'll leave it in their garage until it self-destructs. And then they'll bring it to us and say, can you fix this for under $50? No, there's a garbage can. So it's the same thing here. In that case, you say, listen, what you really need is to spend a bunch of money on a custom soundbar that's basically mono, that just sits on, that you have attached to the bottom of your TV, which is already sitting above your stupid fireplace anyways that you don't use. So who cares? And then have it look like it integrates into the TV. By that, you'll now have quote unquote better sound. No, it won't be surround sound. I don't care what DSP they're trying to use, but at least you'll have louder. And that's what you deserve because that's all that you're really willing to entertain only because of your unwillingness to listen to reason as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
Not that I'm mad or anything. Karl, do we have any thoughts on using line array versus point source speaker systems in smallish, say around 12 foot by 18 foot rooms? So for those of you that aren't particularly well versed on these different speaker systems, a line array is a bunch of the same driver, like in a line, a vertical
typically
line.
Vertically, yeah. Like, so picture like a dozen tweeters, one right above another, just forming a vertical line.
Yeah, and then there'll sometimes be a bunch of smaller woofers right next to them. Yeah, but usually a fewer number because of the amount of space
just
they
the
take
diameter.
up.
Yeah,
the diameter, and they'll be the very large, usually very tall, thin speakers that go up, and they'll be paired with sometimes a couple of subwoofers or whatever, depending on. And the idea here is that these multiple drivers all playing, they can be playing the same thing. They create a more realistic sound. The line array itself, and a point source, of course, is just a single tweeter, like a normal speaker.
Yeah,
single.
I mean, a true point source would be a mathematical point, but the sort of the closest we have to it would be like concentric or coaxial drivers, like picture what Kef does with their UniQ drivers. Picture like an LS50 where the tweeter is embedded right into the middle of the single woofer, and that's as close as you can get to a point source type of design. So personally, I mean, I've heard a lot of different types of, obviously, point source is a typical driver. So I've heard more of that than I've heard of line arrays. And line arrays I've mostly heard in a, some sort of
demo setup sort of thing.
And I mean, where almost anybody in everyday life would have come across line array speakers would be at your local sports venue or your local concert venue, because
where you see those like curved speaker things hanging from the ceiling usually, or
and
maybe
you can
off
sort
to
of
the side.
sometimes see them like they are sort of individual cabinets that have all been pieced together into a long and very often curved array of speakers.
Yeah. So the idea here is that, well, not the idea, but the general like rule of thumb is that line arrays work better or preferable in very large rooms, very large spaces. They can create sound that comes at you in a more like a more realistic way than a single point.
There's some pretty fascinating sound wave interactions going on by having this bunch of drivers all playing the same frequencies, and some of them are even DSP controlled, down to like each individual driver being DSP controlled to really manipulate the waveform that comes out. Because by having all these drivers all playing the same frequency, you're getting a whole bunch of constructive and destructive interference. When you have a bunch of different sources all playing the same sound, that is naturally going to happen. And then with careful DSP control, you can really sort of aim and tailor what the dispersion ends up being. So why they're so effective in a place like a sports venue or a concert venue is what they can sort of create is a pressure wave that almost doesn't disperse particularly vertically up and down.
Yeah.
Where, there's just cancellations going on above and below. They can also sort of curtail or determine the shape of the sideways dispersion that's going out there. But then the sort of focused, almost cylindrical shape of wave that comes straight out the front of that line, it maintains its sound pressure level over a greater distance. It doesn't go by just the regular inverse square law out in open space, where with every doubling of distance, you lose 6 decibels of sound pressure level. It's closer to losing about 3 decibels for every doubling of distance. So very, very useful in a stadium or a concert venue or something like that, because what you don't want are everybody who's physically closer to those speakers is absolutely deafened by how loud it is at its origin, and then everyone who's several rows back in the stadium can't hear anything at all, because just by regular inverse square law, it's now 24 decibels quieter than the people towards the front. You want it to have less of a difference from the front row to the back row, so line arrays make perfect sense in those scenarios. Now, where you will definitely find something which is like the ultimate expression of a line array at home would be electrostatic or ribbon speakers, like true ribbon speakers. You'll see the so-called tweeter of a true ribbon speaker on, say, like a Magnapan speaker or something like that. It's this long, skinny strip that's 6 feet tall or something like that. Now, that's continuous. It's not a series of tweeters all in a line, but that is a line source type of sound, and we get a similar thing. There's almost no sound above and below that line source, given that it's typically wider than a regular 1-inch tweeter. You're having limited dispersion off to the sides, and you get this very focused, you can aim those speakers very much at, like, the left speaker almost solely hits your left ear, and the right speaker almost solely hits your right ear. This very controlled dispersion, and that can give you this sort of holographic imaging, which is hard to achieve any other way, but at the same time, it gives you almost a bit of a headphone effect. And then if you have a wide seating area or you're moving around in the room while you're listening, then that imaging collapses worse than it would on traditional dispersion speakers. So there's pluses and minuses to doing it. It's not like I'm going to say there's never, like, it's bad to use line arrays in a smaller room or something like that. That would be me saying never use electrostatic speakers, and I simply don't feel that way. But for home theater in a smaller style room, you don't need the benefits of that inverse square law not being applying for distances. That's not important in a 12 by 18 foot room. You're going to be able to have acceptable volume levels no matter where you sit in that room. You don't need a line array for that type of thing. And then if you do have like a 3-seater couch, I want the wider dispersion, not the hyper focus of the line array type of thing. So I would typically go point source in a smaller room, particularly for home theater. But if this is a one-person listening situation for music only, then I might have electrostatics or use a line array to achieve the same thing.
You got to remember the line arrays that they're using in like auditoriums and bigger spaces, outdoor arenas too. They have to really be concerned about echoes and reverberations that are coming like from seconds. It takes a while for it to get back. So they have different challenges in it.
And it also helps, like if it's an outdoor concert venue, not having all that sound go into the surrounding neighborhood. Because people who are older will recall, if there was a rock concert on in your neighborhood, the entire neighborhood could hear it all night long. Because we didn't have this line array technology, and certainly not the DSP control of the drivers individually. Now they can do that and almost sort of contain the sound within the stadium to a remarkable degree.
So, Macintosh in particular is one that always stood out to me as having these massive line array speakers that they, blah, 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 that they really, were selling to a very specific clientele. And they look cool. I'm not saying they don't look cool, but I don't, for most rooms, it's just, you might as well not even hook them up if you're going to buy them. Just put them over in the corner and just be like, look at my cool speakers. Do they play? No, not right now. Infinite Gary. So we've been talking about how the kick unit chest bass is actually in the 40 to 60 hertz region, not way down at 20 hertz and below into the infrasonic region. But we've also said how a small sealed sub like this SB1000, for example, won't be able to fully pressurize a larger home theater, say around 15 to 25 feet or so. Since the 15 by 25 feet. And since the SB1000 is minus 3 dB down at 25 hertz, that makes sense if your goal is 20 hertz extension. What about that kick you in the chest region? Is the SB1000 actually more capable than it's being given credit for?
I mean, to some extent, yes.
I mean, so we have here if we have a motto, it's we want you to hear all of the sound, or have that all of the sound should be in the room with you. I guess is kind of what it is. Not too much of some sound and not enough of another. It should be all the sound that is supposed to be at the level it's all supposed to be at. So if you're watching a movie and then there's an explosion, it should be at the volume dial on your receiver that you've set, and the signal that it was sent. Like all those different frequencies should be playing at the right volume, at the right sound level, sound pressure level, all the way up to the very highest notes of the cymbal and the hi-hats and the whistles or whatever else might be going on. Those should also be playing all at the right sound pressure level. That's kind of our motto. So do we have have we ever recommended a subwoofer that's too small for a space and say, well, you'll still get some of that bass that you want. You just won't be able to pressurize the space, and you won't get down as low as maybe we would like you to get. We've done it all the time, especially in large open concept rooms. We do that constantly because you know what, bass is bass, and you're definitely. I mean, look at those stupid 5 speakers on the ceiling, and the last question, the question before, they're never going to play mid-range, much less bass, in a space. So you need something, and you could call it a subwoofer, you could call it a bass module, you could call it both, but you're going to need something, and we often recommend those things.
Yeah, it's similar to the 3000 micro. It actually has very similar output and extension to the SB1000, which is why I think the SB1000 is kind of a considerably better deal, because it's not that much bigger, but if you need the absolute smallest, then the 3000 micro is there, and plenty of people are very happy with that, because particularly if this is, again, mainly to augment a TV system, or if it's a music-only system where there's really not any music going down to 20 hertz. If you roll off at 32 hertz for almost all music, that's going to be sufficient. So yeah, to some extent, I would say, the SB1000 is a little bit more capable than it's sometimes being given credit for. But yeah, if your goal is home theater audio, if your goal is 20 hertz pressurization, then there's many rooms where the SB1000 simply isn't going to be able to achieve that. Just mathematically, it can't do it. And then also SVS does go for more linear response than just the absolute natural response of a sealed subwoofer. So they have some DSP correction going on in there, which is actually kind of tamping down that little bit higher region to keep it more linear as low as it can go. So there is more headroom available from that driver in the SB1000 than its DSP controlled amplifier kind of allows it to output, because they're trying to keep it more linear rather than having a very sort of hill-shaped response where it's considerably louder at 50 hertz and then rolls off appearingly even more steeply. So there's a bit of that going on there, but I think a lot of people would be surprised how satisfied they could be if They didn't have only one subwoofer improperly placed in their room and being like, well, it's a subwoofer that's to blame, and I just need a bigger one. I'm like, there's a lot you can do.
Yeah. So Rob mentioned that the Marantz sound is simply a high-frequency roll-off. It occurred to him that Marantz and Klipsch both originated in 1948. Any chance that the Marantz sound was chosen specifically to offset the brightness of Klipsch speakers?
I mean, I suppose anything is possible, but I don't think that was it. And this is pure speculation on my part, but many people find a mild high frequency roll off very pleasing. And it also helps if your goal is to have the widest sweet spot. It's very helpful to have a mild, not insane, but a mild high frequency roll off very much helps you achieve a wider sweet spot. So if that were my guess, and back in 1948, they were definitely tuning things by ear. There's no question about that. I think that likely had more to do with it. That's just my guess, though. I don't know that I'm right about that.
All right. John, after getting a new Apple TV 4K, he noticed that it advertises having an HDMI 2.1 output. His TCL TV has two HDMI 2.1 inputs, but his Pre-Pro only supports HDMI 2.0. Should he be concerned? Should he get an HDMI 2.1 splitter that can send the video to the TV and a separate to send audio to his Pre-Pro?
No.
I don't think so.
No. So, yeah, this is the horrible thing of the HDMI specification is not the same as the individual features, and HDMI themselves have never wanted companies to use the specification as a shorthand for what features you're going to get, because that isn't really the case. They've only ever wanted manufacturers to talk about the features that are in there and not mention the HDMI spec numbers. So the thing is, the Apple TV 4K supports a feature called quick media switching, which is supposed to help and eliminate the black screen that comes up when the frame rate changes or when you switch from standard dynamic range to high dynamic range, that sort of thing. It's supposed to sort of eliminate that black interstitial, but every link in the chain has to support it in order for it to work. So that one feature was a newly introduced feature under the HDMI 2.1 spec. And so with that, Apple has claimed that the Apple TV 4K has an HDMI 2.1 output because it supports one feature that was introduced under the 2.1 spec. But what we mostly care about in these scenarios is the bandwidth that's being used. And the Apple TV 4K tops out at 18 gigabits per second, which is the exact same as the maximum under the HDMI 2.0 spec. So there is nothing that is ever going to come out of your Apple TV 4K that exceeds the capabilities of what your Pre-Pro that has HDMI 2.0 ports can pass through. The Pre-Pro is not going to support that quick media switching. It doesn't have that feature, and if that's a link in the chain, that part is not going to work, but your current TV doesn't have it either, so no big loss there. So yeah, don't worry about that. You definitely don't need to buy a splitter. John's next question is on his NVIDIA Shield. If you unlock the developer options, you can choose some output resolution and frame rate settings that are not available by default, including 120 Hz output. There's a little radio dial that you can choose in the developer options on the NVIDIA Shield. If you unlock the developer options that says support 120 Hz output, there's also a support 1440p output, which isn't there by default. It's usually either 4K resolution or 1080p resolution, but 1440p can be unlocked. So he knows the NVIDIA Shield has an HDMI 2.0 port, not HDMI 2.1. But looking at the charts that show how much bandwidth is necessary for a given combination of resolution, frame rate, and color bit depth, it looks as though HDMI 2.0 with its 18 gigabits per second should technically be able to transmit 4K resolution at 120 Hz, so long as the bit depth is limited to 8-bit and using 420 chroma subsampling. So lowering the bandwidth that way, but still having the 4K resolution and 120 frames per second. So he's asking, is that an option with the NVIDIA Shield? He's specifically thinking about gaming purposes here, where the 120 Hertz higher refresh rate would be nice to have. Would it be worth stepping down to that 8-bit color, which would mean no HDR, in order to get the higher 120 Hertz refresh rate? And if the NVIDIA Shield cannot do that, are there any stream boxes that can? So yeah, this is an interesting case where the NVIDIA Shield will not ever output 4K at 120 Hz, no matter how you lower the bit depth or turn off HDR or chroma subsample or anything. It will not do 4K resolution and 120 Hz at the same time from the NVIDIA Shield. That 120 Hz support does unlock the option of outputting 1080p resolution at 120 hertz, and technically 1440p at 120 hertz, but all of that, doing anything beyond the default settings, anything that's unlocked in the developer options, all depends on whatever app you're using supporting those features. And so if you're using NVIDIA's own game ready streaming, where like you have a gaming PC and then it streams its output to your NVIDIA Shield that's connected to a different television, that app from NVIDIA themselves does not support 120 hertz. It tops out at 60. So even if you unlock that 120 hertz output option on the NVIDIA Shield in its developer options, it still doesn't work unless the app itself specifically supports it. So there's like a couple of games that you can, well, certainly stuff you can side load, it being Android, that does support 120 hertz, but it would be only at 1080p. There's almost nothing that supports the 1440p output from the NVIDIA Shield whatsoever. So to me, it's not really worth it. There's not really a scenario where doing those settings is honestly going to be beneficial. You're not getting what you wanted, which was 4K at 120. That's just plainly not happening. And then technically you could do 1080p at 120, but there's only like a very scant number of apps that even support it. So that's not something I would worry too much about. We're on to C, Tom.
Yeah, I can see that. He watched a couple of YouTube videos that walk you through the audio and video output settings for the Apple TV 4K. They mention the option of selecting either YCBCR or RGB, high or low, and then either 420 or 444 chroma. And yet, both before and after the latest firmware update, those options do not seem to show up for him anywhere. How does he get them?
So I'll have a link to a very nice, very, very short little example that shows going through the menus there. But there's kind of no way he would have missed them. Like if you just go into the audio and video settings, there's kind of no way he was looking for them. So there's kind of no way that John could have missed them if they were there. So the only thing I can suspect that's going on here is I'm betting at some point, because we know John is reading these types of guides and things like that, and he's been using an NVIDIA Shield up to this point. I'm betting at some point you set the HDMI input that you're using on your TCL TV to its computer mode. Because if you set the TCL TV's HDMI input to computer mode, then it is only ever going to be looking for an RGB signal, and the Apple TV 4K is smart enough to detect that and only ever send an RGB signal in that case. And then you're not going to have the chroma subsampling or YCBCR as even options, because the Apple TV is like, I'm connected to a computer monitor right now, and the only thing the computer monitor understands is an RGB signal, so that's what I'm going to send it. So that's the only thing that to me that makes sense, for those options to not even be there in that Apple TV 4K audio video menu. It must be detecting that it's connected to what it thinks is a computer monitor, which you can manually set on your TCL TV by input by input, HDMI input by HDMI input. You can set it to computer mode on the TCL. So that has to be what has happened there.
Yeah. He watched a couple of YouTube videos that walk you sorry. He's got some videos stored on a NAS that he wants to watch with his NVIDIA Shield, connecting it to the NAS and then playing the video directly was quite easily, but he's having a heck of a time with the Apple TV 4K. Can we offer some advice? Is it not just Plex? Do we not just use Plex for this?
Well, because I mean, Plex isn't as simple as this, because Plex requires you set up a Plex server somewhere, which the Apple TV 4K cannot act as its own server. So you'd have to have, that all set up. He's just like, can't I just look up the video files on my NAS like it's a hard drive that's attached and then play them back? Because you can more or less do that on the NVIDIA Shield. So yeah, it is more complicated on the Apple TV 4K because it does not have OS level support for detecting a NAS on your network and just seeing it as a thumb drive that's been plugged into it, that sort of thing. It doesn't do that. This again has to go app by app to have this support. And definitely what you'll want to do in the case of the Apple TV 4K is get the Infuse app. The Infuse app, and this will be within the apps setting, okay? So this isn't in the Apple TV 4K's own system settings. This is within the Infuse app's own settings. That you can put in the IP address of your NAS, and the Infuse app will detect and connect to it just fine. Just put in the IP address, and then it will just let you browse the files that are on your NAS like it's just a hard drive that's being connected, and Infuse can play back just about
something you recognize, that's for sure.
Yeah.
That's always been my problem.
But yeah, that's certainly the solution for you here on the Apple TV 4K. For sure, you want to get the Infuse app and use that.
So it was easy to find movies to purchase in the Apple's Apple Movie Store, but is there any way to download any movies he purchases to his NAS? In his area, he has internet or power outages, but he has a generator and he prefers to download things for offline viewing so that he can always enjoy an uninterrupted experience.
I'm afraid not.
I'm going to say that's just the whole problem with Apple is that, well, I mean, it's not just Apple, but Apple has historically been reluctant to give you access to the things that you think you should have access to.
Well, I mean,
which is
on
why people
top
prefer
of that,
Android.
They do give you the option of downloading movies to your iPhone or your iPad for offline viewing. They even give you the option of downloading them to your Mac computer, but only at a maximum of 1080p resolution. They won't let you download 4K to your Mac computer. But on the Apple TV 4K, there is no option to download whatsoever from Apple Movies. So I'm afraid the answer there, as far as the Apple TV 4K goes, is a flat no. I did forget to answer back on that. Is there any streaming box that does 4K 120, for gaming purposes? At the moment, no. There's no streaming box that has that support. Forgot to mention that earlier.
Okay. Stefan, the JVC NP5 versus its new replacement, the NZ500. Aside from the obvious change from the lamp in the NP5 to lasers in the NZ500, what are the feature differences? Let's also put aside the price difference since the NP5 is being cleared out. What are our opinions on the NP5 versus the 500 NZ500? And with the projector 15 feet away from the screen, would a 135-inch screen be either too big for either or both of them? So 135-inch screen is about the biggest that you can get with a home theater projector, just like as a rule of thumb. Like anything bigger than that, you're just, high dynamic range is not going to look all
with
that
the caveat
high.
of SDR looking different from HDR, because you can definitely go bigger than 135 with many home theater projectors if you're only worried about SDR. But if you want HDR to actually look different versus SDR, then 135 is kind of the top. And it's kind of pushing it for these models. These models are rated at 1900 lumens for the NP5, rated at 2000 lumens for the NZ500. Effectively, the NZ500 does look brighter because with that laser light engine, even though on paper it's only 100 lumens difference, it does tend to maintain full screen brightness better than the NP5 does overall. You sort of have to build in a little bit of headroom with the lamp bait system on the NP5, whereas the laser can get pretty close to its actual spec claims. So it does genuinely, to the eye, appear as a brighter projector. And for that reason alone, on a 135-inch screen, you might quite strongly prefer the NZ500 in this instance. But feature difference-wise, a couple of big ones. The NP5 can do 4K 120. Both of these projectors are using the exact same actual 4K resolution, liquid crystalline silicon, or JVC calls it DILA, but they're using the exact same physical panels, but the NP5 can do 4K resolution at 120 hertz. The NZ500 tops out at 60. It stops at 60 hertz. It will not do 120 hertz. So if that was a big, important thing for you, that's a clear-cut advantage for the older NP5. Also, the NP5 can do 3D, and the NZ500 cannot. So if you wanted 3D, that makes the decision for you. The older NP5 can still do it. NZ500 absolutely cannot. Other differences, physically the NZ500 is smaller. That might be a plus to you. It is to many people. But with that smaller chassis comes a different lens. And the lens has less zoom range on the newer NZ500. It's a 1.6 times zoom range. The NP5 has a 2 times zoom range, so there's greater range of distances that the NP5 can be placed. And the lens shift range, both horizontal and vertical, is larger on the older NP5. So you gave up a few things there with that NZ500 for sure. But none of that is to say that 1.6 times zoom is still pretty reasonable. The lens shift range, horizontal and vertical, is still quite good on the NZ500. It's just smaller. It's not bad. It's just smaller than the NP5 used to be. The NP5 was really generous in both its zoom range and its lens shift range. So for the distance that you quoted, neither of them has a problem casting a 135-inch image. It's not like that's out of the possibility. Either of them can cast that size image. So yeah, if you don't care about 120 hertz, if you don't care about 3D, then I think for that screen size, you'll probably prefer the NZ500 just because it is noticeable to the eye as being brighter than the NP5. Both of them have the wonderful frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping that JVC does, so not a huge difference there, but the NZ500 just does look brighter, so I think you'll like it better on 135 inches. Julian
is a construction superintendent. And a while back, he wrote us to get some advice about the new home theater he's planning to construct in an addition he was going to build onto his house. Mm-hmm. Well, best laid plans, right? He's got a toddler now, and his wife is returning to grad school to get her second master's degree.
Congrats.
She'll get it right this time, for sure.
She got the first one. She's adding on.
I know. Just keep sending her back to school until she gets it right. That's what I say.
Sure.
To keep messing it up.
We have no idea how much smarter his wife is than both of us put together.
Probably a lot, I'll be honest with you. Probably a noticeable amount. Like to the average consumer, if they put us all in the same room, they go, "Ooh, look at those two dummies with that really smart girl." And so you tell her that I did not say this, and it was all Rob.
We haven't said anything bad. Plus, she had a kid during all this.
I know.
Dear.
And since they had already begun a renovation of their upstairs level prior to anything having to do with the planned addition, and completing that upstairs renovation has now become the top priority, which is probably good.
Mm-hmm.
And the planned addition is not going to happen for another few years yet. He's going to put the bags back on and finally get this done. You know what that means.
Well, because he's a construction superintendent now, but he used to be the laborer at one point back in the day. So he's like, well, gonna strap that tool bag back on and do the work himself. You see, yeah.
And it involves the home theater, so he's come to us for a little bit more advice. You're a superintendent. Make somebody else do it. That's what I say. What are you a superintendent of? Because guess what? Your wife's a superintendent of you. I'll tell you that right now.
There's one thing she put her foot down on, and it's pretty reasonable, honestly, given what's going on.
I don't want to see any speakers.
Not quite.
Sorry.
There was something she didn't want to see, though, and it's fair.
So to refresh the old setup, he had the whole setup had the home theater in the. To refresh, the old setup had the home theater in the living room with a large opening to the dining room on the right and a doorway with no door to the kitchen as well. The stairs coming up are at the back of the living room, separated by a half wall, and then there's a hallway going to back to the bathroom and the bedroom. So it's like forever. He had used curtains to cover the windows and visually close off the openings to the dining room. There was limited lighting. And he had used Romex staples to tack the speaker wire and cables onto the walls and ceiling.
Can you guess what his wife didn't want after the renovation is complete anymore? And I do think that's fair.
You know what? I do appreciate this. This is very smart. It's a psychological warfare that I approve of. You do something that's so blatantly horrible that everything else looks fine in comparison. You don't like the way speakers looks? How do you feel about stapled speaker wire to the wall?
I mean, some of it's even going into like the trim on the top of the banister of that half wall back there. So
you know what you do is that you sprinkle a little salt water on those staples every once in a while, just so they rust and the rust starts to run down the wall. I approve. This is you don't let your wife listen to this part,
right? But
this is how you get what you want. Is you give her something to really hate. You need a villain. You see, America has known this forever. Mm-hmm. We need a villain, and right now, you can make some very compelling arguments as to who the villain is in our country at this point, and whether or not our country is the villain. Anyways, let's just say his wife has never been a big fan of the looks, but it was only supposed to be temporary, right? Yeah, that's what we said. Just keep him up there for 4 years and then get rid of him. But now that they know this is going to be a more permanent setup, he drew up the plans, and the theater is now becoming more of a dedicated space. He has already constructed a wall to close off that opening to the dining room, and the door has been installed to close off the kitchen. And there's a door at the bottom of the stairs. And while that hallway...
Tom's distracted by something.
What is,
on YouTube, you can't see.
What is your deal? Get over here and lie down. She demanded to come in this room.
He's talking to a dog, by the way, folks, for
She
anyone
was
who's brand new.
demanding to come in. She was knocking at the door, and I was like, "What is this noise?" And all of a sudden, the door opened, and the boys had let her in because
Right.
she was. They realized that this was going to be a problem. At the bottom of the stairs, and while the hallway is going back is still open. There are doors that can close off all the other rooms, so it's a lot less of an open space to pressurize. The wires and cables are all being run inside the walls, and the new ceiling that is replacing the old new ceiling that is replacing the old textured ceiling. And he wants to put all the gear on the other side of the new wall in the dining room. That should go over well to get lights and heat out of the theater. He made a projection screen frame mock-up to make sure he got the new screen size just right. He knows they're going to be sitting 10 feet from eyes to screen, and with that lockdown, they've decided on a 120-inch diagonal screen size. That's too big, but that's just my opinion. Yep. It has already been ordered from Silver Ticket to avoid those incoming tariffs. It actually looks okay on that wall, to be honest with you. That chair,
although the camera's a little farther back than the chair, so it will be
a
bigger field of view.
The size. It does look a little slightly off-center to me, but maybe
that might be optical
shadows.
Illusion, honestly, from the shadows, Yeah.
So the projector ceiling mount is being moved back so that it's over the stairway, but the half wall that separates the stairs from the back of the living room is still there. With all of that explained, which very little of it matters to me. Let's get to some questions. He is happy with his SVS Prime Pinnacle front towers and SVS Ultra Center, as well as his pair of SVS subs. He's also been happy with his Prime Elevation front and rear height speakers, so he's keeping and reusing all of those. He already went ahead and got a third pair of Prime Elevation speakers since he wants to have 6 overhead speakers, so those are being installed as top middles. But for surround and surround backs, guess what I'm going to say? But
it's coming up. So don't get ahead of yourself. It's coming up in his own content.
For surround and surround backs, he was using some old Polk RTI bookshelf speakers, and he'd like to replace those. We already said that in his old setup, he should probably just eliminate the surround backs as they were in suboptimal position, and his surround backs and rear heights were all in close proximity to one another. He does have the option now of putting the surround backs on the actual back wall above the stairway, but they would need to be elevated to clear the half wall that's still behind his seats. What do we think? Move the surround backs or eliminate them altogether? I'm going to hold your hand when I say this to all of my AVRant listeners. If you have to ask me whether or not you should eliminate your surround backs, the answer is Tom thinks you should eliminate your surround backs.
The only sensible place to me, since that half wall does still exist and we can still see the stairway in that older photo, I'm like, the only place that the surround backs could go is quite high up, because otherwise they're going to be a little bit awkwardly positioned as you're coming up those stairs, in my opinion. I would have them quite elevated, which means they're mimicking what your rear heights are already doing. So for that reason, I find it pretty difficult.
If you're not looking at this, just imagine that they're sitting on the couch, right? Yeah. And then the couch is lower than the half wall. And in order to get the speakers above the half wall so that they're got like an ear, they can see your ear, right? Or the back of your head in this case. They'd have to be a certain height, but that height might be too low for people walking up the stairs.
Yeah.
Especially I don't know which side is it looks like the right surround back speaker would be towards where the people would exit the stairs. That one should be even higher because they're going to be standing. So now both of them have to be higher. So the angle of the speaker to your head and the angle of the surround, rear height to your head would be almost identical. Yeah. They'd be shooting past each other. So there is no real reason. I don't like surround back speakers, full stop, but these would be almost identical to rear heights. So yes, there's just...
And I suppose you could consider putting in-wall speakers into that actual back wall in the stairwell.
Or really into the half wall.
I guess. But here's the thing. Well-positioned, well-calibrated surround speakers are going to give you a convincing effect that sounds are coming from behind you. So that's my real answer. I agree with Tom. In this case, I would eliminate the surround back speakers.
So no matter what, he wants new surround speakers. We'd like to mount them on the side walls and like them to protrude less than the old Polk bookshelf speakers. So should he just use another pair of Prime Elevations as surrounds? should he mount prime satellites? Both of those just feel kind of small given his pinnacle towers and ultra center. But yeah, that's why scientists also often go on vibes. the vibes were off on this experiment, so we threw out the results. But given the actual size of the room, would those small surround speakers actually be the best choice? Should he get ELEC debut on walls instead, or something else entirely? Whatever he gets, he'd like to get the price below $500 a pair. The satellites, or whatever they're called, the prime satellites, will be perfectly fine.
Yeah, you have no distance concerns in this setup that they are too small to be able to contend as surround speakers.
These will be fine.
I get where he's coming from, but yeah, that would be the natural choice. The natural choice would just be a pair of satellite speakers, prime satellites. They'd be a great choice, certainly within the price point that you're talking about, and obviously going to timbre match very nicely, having literally the identical tweeter to your front speakers and the prime elevations for that matter. So that's the easy choice. If for some reason you're just really like, nope, they're just physically too small and I can't get over it, I could suggest to you a Sense HTM200 SE2 speakers. Different drivers, so they're not necessarily a literal perfect timbre match. They're not the same driver, literally, but both companies aim for a very linear response in that Prime series and in that Ascend SE2 series. So for $370 plus $10 for the flush mounts that Ascend charges, they are definitely within your budget, and they are easy to wall mount, and they are nice and compact, but bigger than the SVS Prime satellites, so maybe they will be a good choice there. But yeah, prime satellites are the right choice here.
Yes, I said it, so I agree. As mentioned, he wants to put all of the gear in the dining room on the other side of the wall, so he's naturally picturing a full equipment rack. B&H Photo seems to have some affordable equipment racks available. Are they decent and an okay purchase? I mean, you have to be a little bit more specific than they have some.
Well, I think he's almost certainly looking at the first results that pop up now. And I don't know exactly what happened to Peerless AV's equipment racks because they don't seem to show up anymore. And they were often our favorite choice for like a really good value, but very, very good equipment rack was from Peerless. If you actually just search Peerless AV equipment rack at B&H Photo, this other brand shows up now. So I'm like, was it maybe just a rebranding thing? It's not out of the question. Anyway, if those are the ones that you're talking about, because I'm sure they are. They're the first result that show up, and they're much less expensive than like the Middle Atlantic racks, for example.
Which are really expensive.
They're totally fine. You know, they're not the highest, heaviest duty. Total supported weight is 440 pounds on those ones that show up first. Should be perfectly sufficient unless you have just some crazy amplifiers and more than one of them that you're putting in there. 440 pounds should be totally sufficient for what you're putting in there. So I don't have any problem with them. They do have casters on them. But I'm also going to say, it's not entirely necessary for you to go with a literal equipment rack, especially in the type of setup that you're talking about. I'm going to suggest at least have a look, because it doesn't hurt anything to have a look. Over at Monoprice, in their Monolith series, they have some really nice equipment stands. They are your sort of typical equipment stand type of thing, but the Monolith ones, and they have a heavy-duty one, which is only like $160 for a 4-shelf version of it, one of which is really nice and tall because it wants to fit their own Monolith amplifiers in there, so it's like extra reinforced and extra tall. So it's really nice to have that option. I think, like, personally, I might go with an option like that here because this is going to be living in your dining room. You are going to see it. Do I want a metal equipment rack that looks very industrial, or do I want, like, it's not super fancy, it's plain, black MDF and covered in a nice textured black finish on it, but I'm like, it just looks more like furniture, and then it's got all the space and the support that you need.
Okay. Well, I'll finish reading this question. He might decide to keep his source devices inside the theater, but they might also go in the rack. And then he's debating putting an audio control distribution amp into the rack as well, so that he could put his Marantz into preamp mode and not use any of its built-in amps, because that'll make a sonic difference. That's
really unnecessary. You don't. That Parasound is wonderful for your front speakers, and the rest can absolutely be driven by your Marantz. So I wouldn't bother with the other amp.
So do we have sort of a rack mounting 101 tutorial for him? Does he need to get a rack ears for all of his pieces of gear? Do we have any specific advice about cooling? He does already have an AC Infinity cooling fan, but it's a model that exhausts straight up out of the top. Well, that seems less helpful. So I've had a bunch of different racks over the years, and some of them have had fans in them. Some of them have been enclosed with like a glass front. Some of them have been completely open. You're a construction guy.
Mm-hmm.
have a hard time believing you need to buy a rack. I'm going to be honest with you.
Oh, I see.
If this is going to be an installation, you know what I mean? If you're going to put things in here and then they're going to stay in here. Right. And they're not going to be, you're not moving the rack around a bunch. I don't know why you wouldn't just build yourself a little closet. You know, just build yourself a rack with a little door, a louver door or whatever, or a glass door or something like that, and then have exhaust fans, you know, that when you maybe pull air in through the bottom and then exhaust into the attic at the top, you know what I mean? And then if you're like, I'm worried about, you know, accessing the back of these things with drawers that pull in and out. You can install slides. You can install these things, and with a gap in the back of this thing so that the cables can go up and down freely without you having to fish them through little holes that you know, like a doorknob hole thingy that you've cut through it. Just leave it open in the back, you know, with a gap between the back of the shelf and the wall. If it were me, I'll be honest with you. I don't know how your wife feels about staples, but I'm pretty sure she's going to feel the exact same way about an equipment rack in their dining room.
Yeah,
she is.
I'm not a fan of the metal rack in this case, but if you insist upon it, you know, most of the equipment that you mentioned doesn't really have rack ear options. So any of these equipment racks, you can just fit in. They're just sheet metal shelves that go in there. They're what screw into the rack system instead, and it just provides you a shelf to sit any equipment on there. So that'd be the solution there.
Yeah, that's me. Based on our previous advice, you already got an APC BGM 1500B pure sine wave battery backup UPS projector. He has already run an in-wall power line extension from the new location for the projector to where his equipment rack will go. Is there any reason he should avoid plugging the rest of his gear into the other outlets, including the surge-only outlets of that same APC unit? Do his receiver and amp need a surge protector of their own in order to ensure the best performance? And since that particular APC model is clearly intended to stand vertically, does it have to be oriented that way, or would it be okay to lay it on the side so it can fit inside the equipment rack? The APC, I don't think it really cares. It's just about cooling. So that's the one thing I would worry about is where the
and it's got a little
vents
display on it, so the display is going to be sideways, and you'll have to cock your head to read it. But it's functionally, it's perfectly fine to lay it on its side. It's not like it's going to damage itself in some way or something like that by laying outside. So that's perfectly fine.
So the only time you really have to worry about plugging something into a surge protector is if it's going to have a large power draw, which of course amplifiers can.
Yep.
So that being said, I have had no problems plugging my receivers into various surge protectors.
And this is not a giant space anymore. So, I mean, it never was a giant space.
Now it's
even smaller than it was before. So this is no problem. You can have everything plugged into that.
I would worry plugging a subwoofer into it.
Maybe, yes.
But not a receiver.
Yeah.
So the rest of it, I would be okay, or your amps for that matter.
Right. And I probably wouldn't plug your amplifier and your AV receiver into the battery backup because that does have a limit on the current that can come from the battery. But that's lovely. It's got the surge-only outlets, and they're perfect for that.
So with no line of sight from the theater to the equipment stand, he's going to need a new remote control solution. Should he just get a Sofa Baton X1S? You can wait for the X2. It's about to come out.
I would at least wait because it's supposed to come out in May, which isn't that far away at this point. I would at least wait to see. I mean, if there's no sign of it, if Sofa Baton is way behind schedule and there's no sign, then the X1S is almost kind of the only game in town anymore. But yeah, I'm gonna suggest strongly waiting to see through April and May, because if they do an official announcement in April and they're like it's coming out in May, Sofa Baton's been pretty reliable when they make an official announcement like that. So I would hang on because I think the X2 is going to be a better solution.
Yeah. Joshua's a brand new AVRant listener. He heard about us from a user on Reddit, and he hopes it's okay to email us directly with a bunch of questions right away.
That's what we're here for, Joshua. Welcome aboard. Happy to have you.
Oh, yeah. What the Canadian said. He is having a new pool house constructed. They'll be 30 by 30 by 10 and completely detached, standing on its own. A little over half, about 17 feet wide, 30 feet long, will be used as a theater area. The other half is dedicated to being a golf simulator, which is actually his number one priority in this new building, and a small home gym area. He says for multiple reasons he wants to keep the entire thing quite open, so there's basically no left wall for the theater area. His main concern in writing this at this point, before construction has even begun, begun, is to formulate a plan for what the home theater equipment will be so that he can plan out the wiring. Despite how much space he has available, he wants to use in-walls. That's not going to work because there's no wall on one side.
Well, on the left, there's no wall there, but everywhere else, there's walls.
He wants to use in-walls and retain every square foot of floor space he can. That said, the projection screen that he wants for the theater will be mounted about a foot in front of the physical wall to allow for lighting and audio treatment and speakers to go behind it. Oh, he's thinking he's going to just put acoustic panels behind his screen, and then you won't have to have them anyplace else.
Well, no, he didn't say that. He does plan other acoustic treatments, but he wants to use that front wall space behind this massive screen that he has planned. That's okay.
He has settled on wanting a distance from eyes to screen of about 18 feet using a massive 220-inch 16 by 9 screen size. Well, okay.
Now, he didn't talk about it specifically, but the good news is those Epsons that came out are now delivering way more light output for lower money than was previously possible. So given some of the other stuff he's going to say, I'm going to mention that here because if you didn't already know about the newest Epson projectors that are out there, they're probably going to be your top choice.
All right. He will have blackout screen shades that can cover the windows and doors, and he doesn't intend to acoustically treat the space overall. He wants to have the most.
That sort of sounded like you said doesn't, but he does.
Yes. He wants to have the most up-to-date audio and video capabilities, but despite what we might be imagining giving everything described so far, he does care about keeping costs somewhat under control and not going ridiculously overboard.
Mm-hmm.
No.
And that's why I said
wall.
That's why I said the Epsons, because there are $80,000 plus projectors that can light up your 220-inch screen, but not that many at what I would consider a somewhat reasonable cost. We're still talking in the $10,000 to $20,000 range, but that's a heck of a lot less than 80. So those Epsons are going to be a great choice for you.
So despite some of the suggestions that were mentioned to him, he's leaning towards a Denon A10H receiver, maybe a 1H, but his initial plans are for a 7.2.4 configuration, although he's open to installing more than 11 speakers if we think it'll be worth it. I don't. I never do, but let's go on. So let's dig in a bit. He has some suggestions to semi-close in the seating area to give him somewhere to mount his surround left speaker and supposedly benefit the audio experience in some way, but they would only be partial height walls, and for his own reasons, he would prefer to keep the entire pool house as open concept and free from as obstructions as possible. So what do we make of this? Semi-close in the seating area idea. Would it really benefit his audio experience so much that it'd be worth giving up the floor space and open concept ideas? So if you do not have a wall on your left, you are gonna run into the problem that all this 2.4 thing that you're coming up with is suddenly going to be somewhat impossible because there'll be
some kind of compromise on the left side. Sure.
Well, I mean, are you going to put a right speaker at ear level and a left speaker on the ceiling or on a stand? If you're willing to use a stand, well, then we maybe have more options.
And something could be extended down from the ceiling. It doesn't have to be in the ceiling. You could have a pole coming down.
Wow, that's a terrible idea.
I don't know. I'm just saying it is possible. Something can be suspended down from the ceiling.
That's no world am I doing that. I mean, with a 30-foot, I mean, I can't imagine he's going 30 feet wide, 18 feet deep. He's going to be going 30 feet deep, 18 feet wide, right?
For the theater area, but I mean, the 30 by 30 is basically all open to itself. He's just setting up the theater area as one half of that space. So, I mean, technically, you could have the surround left speaker all the way over by your golf simulator on that wall way over there, but that's a little bit nuts. That's a little bit crazy to do that,
So here's my question to you: Are you willing to put something on the stand? First of all, hanging it from the ceiling is insanity. Only a Canadian would suggest that. I don't understand where that idea came from. Only a deranged mind would come up with that idea and think that it was viable. Can you imagine a pole sticking from your ceiling in an open concept room? No, you having a stand next to your couch. You're going to have a couch, a row of seats only in here? You're not going to have multiple
It
rows?
sounded like,
It's a 30?
he didn't make any mention of multiple rows of seats. That wasn't. It doesn't mean it isn't happening for sure. And the thing was, he did try to send a couple of photos in the email, but they didn't come through for some reason. So I apologize for that. We're missing some of the information that I'm sure he intended to convey in the photos or diagrams, but that just didn't make it through on the email for whatever formatting reason. The other question I had was, is there any possibility that there's a support column anywhere in this space?
Yeah.
Because if there's a support column anywhere in this space, then voila, that's where your surround left speaker is going to go. Not necessarily an in-wall model, because that might not be conducive for whatever support column there is, but you can have something mounted to that support column, and that's where that left surround would go at that point.
We do need to know like the layout of the construction.
Which he did attempt to
bit.
send, so that's a little bit. I didn't notice that the photos didn't work until I was putting together the topic list this morning, so that's a little bit on my end there.
So if you're not planning on 2 rows or 3, even 2 rows of seats, I would imagine would work in here very well. If you're not doing that, then you should.
Well, the other
you
thing
should
is,
definitely consider that.
If you're considering just even 2 rows of seats, having one of those seats on a set of risers, because it's going to be a 10-foot tall space, you can have a riser for that back row. Suddenly, that riser, if you include a walkway, like steps that go up on the side of that riser, that's given you a place where now the surround left speaker on, like basically a pole that's attached to that riser, right? That gives you a place to mount. More sense. That gives you a place to mount that. So I'm not in favor of the Reddit idea that was proposed to you of like sort of like trying to visually close in the seating area with half height walls. No, I'm not going to say that, but I am going to say, a riser for a back row, and then you can have just a pole coming up from that constructed riser with its own steps and walkway on the left. That gives you a place to mount the surround left speaker. I think that might be the nicest solution that isn't permanent, right? This can be a freestanding riser that the seats are going on.
You have a handrail. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Off of that, and a pole off of that handrail.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know there's a whole bunch of questions here, and I have not read any of them. I don't know what any of this is going to say. Let me just tell you what I think, okay? Now that we've kind of talked about this a little bit. You have, you want to keep this all open? I am 100% for that, and I have no problems with that. This is what I think you do. First of all, I think a 220-inch screen is ridiculous. I think it's just too big. It's going to make you pay for a very... you're trying to keep costs down. That's not the way to do it. Okay, the way to do it...
necessarily say down. Like, this is someone who could afford a golf simulator, but it's just...
I don't know how much those things cost. It could be $20 for all I know. They could be $20,000 for all I know. I don't know how much. He
didn't want us to assume that he's going for it's going to be Trinov, it's going to be Ascendo, it's going to be all these really high dollar things that are frequently going along with a space this size.
So but still, I mean, projectors that can do HDR at a 220-inch screen are very hard to come by, and
but like
they
I say,
are
those
very
Epsons
expensive.
exist. They're great.
So this is what I think. I don't know why you came up with 18 feet from ice to screen. Probably because of whatever.
Well, he's probably I want to be a little bit more than half the distance of this in total depth, and the total depth is 30 feet. So I'm a little bit more than half and behind the halfway point.
This is what I think. I think you have 2 rows of seats because this is going to be cheaper. I think you have 2 rows of seats. Okay, 1 row is in front of that halfway point, and 1 row is behind that halfway point. Then you make that front row the primary row for watching movies. You can use it for whatever, but you make it the primary row. Now that one that's in front is more like 12 feet or 10 feet away, and suddenly your screen's...
probably not 10 feet, but 12 feet sounds about right.
12 feet, right? Now your screen's 120 inches. Maybe your screen, you know what I mean?
You could do like 150, 160.
You could do 135, 150. You can do whatever you want, okay? But it's not 220, all right? And that becomes your primary row. Then you have a riser for your second row, which starts right behind your first row of seats, right? And then off of the riser, like Rob's talking about, you have not 1 but 2 side surround speakers that are on poles whatever that are servicing each of these 2 rows, right?
And like I say, it doesn't have to be built into the framing of the room itself. That can be a freestanding riser. And that way, if you change your mind and you want to remove it, you haven't committed to a built-in thing for holding that surround left speaker.
Yeah, and then the speaker wire just comes out of the wall, the right wall, and then you run it down underneath the riser.
Under the riser,
and then up the pole.
All removable, all reversible if you want to.
Yes. Then, okay, we don't have surround back speakers because they suck, but also because they're going to have to be so high and everything else to get to that first row of seats, which is your primary rows of seats. So we only have 5 point, and we can do 6 if we went on top, or 4 on top.
Yeah, if you have the 2 rows of seats, I don't mind having 6 overhead speakers in this installation. And they can be in ceilings, so they're visually hidden and not taking up anything away from the aesthetics.
Yeah. So you have 5.2 or 4. I think we're going to end up at 4, to be honest with you. 5.4.6 4 or 6 on top. That's where I'm going to land here. Okay. And this is how I lay this out. This keeps your screen size down, makes your projector look better. Your primary row seats in the front is probably going to be too close for playing video games. Like first-person shooters, you're going to get nauseated up there. So you want a row of seat that's further back that will allow that screen size to shrink down, so you won't get that motion sickness, right? So that second row of seat is for playing games. It has a purpose
that you will actually use, even if you don't have as many guests over as you're probably imagining in your head.
Right. So that's why you have 2 rows of seats. Plus, it keeps your screen size down. I think the whole thing works better if you do it that way. That's where I am. All right. So now his second question, now that I've already answered them all. Should he jump straight to 7.2.6 or perhaps 9.2.4? Yeah, because you have so much room for speakers that you should just put more of them on the wall that isn't there. Or should 9.2.6 and therefore then an A1H instead of a A10H be a part? No.
Yeah, I'm not seeing you getting to 15 speakers in this setup, no matter what happens. Like, where are you going to put a front wide speaker on that left side? The left-hand side, it makes no sense for a front wide speaker. So, whether it's 5 channels, it could be 7 speakers because you might have 2 pairs of side surround speakers, like Tom suggested. So technically it's 7 speakers, but it's still only 5 channels. And like I say, with the 2 rows of seats, I'm kind of in favor of the 6 overhead speakers in this instance. So I'm not against that at all. The A10H is a beautiful AV receiver that's right up to date. So I don't think you need the A1H here at all. I don't think you're going to get to 50.
So Reddit suggested JBL Synthesis or JBL Pro for him because they like to spend other people's money. He's not opposed to perform on a performance or form factor level, but he preferred the lower price point of the JBL Studio series. Ooh. If you were if you were to stick with JBL. His own idea was to go with the KEF THX Ultra Series in walls and all around. So, out of the suggestions, would we strongly point him in one direction or the other, or perhaps we have our own suggestions for what you should get as far as in-wall and in-ceiling speakers go? I mean, not JBL Studio.
Right. And the KEF THX Ultras, they're going to kind of be at their limits if you're going for sort of cinema reference levels. But they're not a bad choice by any means. Like if you really favor them for some particular reason, I'm not going to say any sort of hard no to them. They would be okay, but they'd be sort of right at their limits. However, almost everything you've talked about is going to be visually hidden, other than the single or maybe 2 surround left speakers, but that's about it. And you've talked about I want really top performance, but keeping the budget, respectable, not tiny, but respectable and under control. So one you might not have considered is from Aperion Auto, their Theatris series of speakers. I really like these for an installation like this. These are 94 dB efficient. From 1 watt, they're producing 94 dB from a meter away, with 700 watts power handling, okay? So these can handle the distances and room size that you're talking about at what I consider to be pretty darn reasonable prices. We're talking $1,550 for one of the dual 8-inch, dual mid-range, folded ribbon tweeter in-wall speakers. So it's not like it's cheap, but compared to a lot of other speakers that can produce this sort of output level and have this sort of sensitivity, that's a pretty darn killer deal. I wanted to mention those Aperion Theatris. They have the full complement, and one thing I love about these is incorporated back boxes. These are sealed in-wall speakers. You don't have to worry about separate backer boxes, but they still attach with just the regular dogleg attachments, so they're easy to install. They're already sealed, because a lot of people overlook having that rear enclosure, and I hate when that happens. So this is everything you need with the type of efficiency and output that you need at a very reasonable price. They have in ceilings as well, and then they have slim wall mountable ones if you want to keep everything in line that could go on that riser that you're building if you follow our advice, and everything's going to match and have the output capabilities you need at a really good price.
All right. I have to go.
Okay.
I have to get a child to a doctor's appointment, and I cannot miss this doctor's appointment.
Okay,
so
that's fair.
You will either have to finish by yourself, but I will say you should be thinking about, as far as acoustic treatments in here, as part of the look of the place. So the acoustic panels, I think 2x4 by 4-inch thick panels spaced evenly around the entire room. Except where the screen is, and then your golf simulator. If you can get them behind the golf simulator, I know it's like a net or something that hangs down. I don't know how that thing works. And then 4 subs, 1 in each corner, because I think mid-wall placement is going to be difficult. I think shoving them in the corners is probably the way to go. But that's sort of how I'm envisioning this. So I'm envisioning like a room that's mostly very dark, very gray, and maybe like red panels as sort of the accent color throughout the entire thing, or black or whatever,
or a dark blue, something like maybe you got a favorite team color that's often popular. That type
and you
of thing.
or printed panels, of course, are always an option. But I have to go, so I will be leaving.
We will bid you adieu then, and yes, I'll carry on to at least finish up this series of questions that we had from who are we talking to here? Joshua. Okay, so farewell, Tom. And let's see, where did we get down to here? And some of these we've already sort of covered in what we talked about, but I'll mention them when we go along there. So since he does intend to have his front speakers behind his projection screen, does it matter how they are oriented? For example, does the center speaker have to be horizontal, since he's always seen center speakers with that orientation, or can it be vertical so that it fits between the studs? So anything that's behind the acoustically transparent projection screen, I mean, that can be oriented any way that you want. In fact, you'll be happy to hear that basically the center speaker was never meant to be a horizontal speaker. That came about because people were putting it above or below a television screen. That's where that came from. So the idea was that it was 3 identical vertical speakers in the original sort of designs for front, left, center, and right. And therefore, there are people who are strong proponents of you only ever want to use an acoustically transparent projection screen so that you can have a vertically oriented center speaker that is identical to your front, left, and right speakers directly behind that screen, with all 3 tweeters of those front speakers at the exact same ear height, no difference in height between the tweeters, since typically, again, a center speaker above or below a TV, now the tweeter's at a different height than your front, left, and right speakers. So you have sort of backwards gone into what many people are like, oh, this is ideal, this is what you want. You want 3 identical speakers, all oriented the same, all with the tweeters at seated ear height, and kind of the only way to do that without a speaker ending up directly behind or directly in front of your TV screen is to use a acoustically transparent projection screen. People are big fans of that. So absolutely, you can have 3 identical speakers all oriented the same, all behind your big projection screen. Yes, what can be done about that left surround speaker? We have covered that, and I think we hit upon quite a nice solution that you might not have considered. And like I say, I like that. Building that riser, having that left surround speaker, or 2 left surround speakers, 1 for each row of seats, having that supported by that riser, it lets you reverse it if you want to. It lets you make changes. It lets you hide the wires underneath the riser, having run them along the right perimeter wall that does exist. I think that solves a lot of issues for you if you go that route. I hope you do, because I think that's the best solution in this scenario. Next part, he was thinking that he'd have in-wall subwoofers in addition to in-wall speakers, and he was thinking he'd install 1 in-wall subwoofer in the front left corner of the theater area. So not the front left corner of the building as a whole, but the front left corner of the theater area, and then the rear right corner of the theater area, which actually is the rear right corner of the building in this case. And he was going to have that front sub also hidden behind the projection screen is what he was thinking. But folks on Reddit warned him that the KEF in-wall subwoofers he was considering are truly not up to the task of contending with 9,000 cubic feet, 30 by 30 by 10 of open air that he is going to have. The subwoofers have no idea that you've designated half of this space as the theater. It's like, no, that's all open air. It's going to try to move all of that 9,000 cubic feet of air. So he was perfectly fine with the idea of pre-wiring for 4 in-wall subwoofers. Tom mentioned that as well. And when he said the 4 corners, he's meaning the 4 corners of the building, not the 4 corners of just the theater area, the 4 corners of the actual building. But he was also warned away on Reddit from going with in-wall subs in general. And here, I think the folks you were listening to on Reddit have the right idea. There are just limitations to what you can do with built-in in-wall subs, and any that would be able to contend with this room size that you're dealing with, that's going to be some of the models from RBH, that's going to be JL Audio in-wall subwoofers. They're going to break your budget. They are really, really expensive for you to be able to do this. There's ones that could be installed in the ceiling as well. You have attic space above. RBH has several in-ceiling subwoofer models, but they are not cheap. If you really, really, really want to do it that way, absolutely that is an option. I would probably point you to the RBH ones, and I kind of like the idea of the in-ceiling ones because, you're going to have that attic space anyway. You're going to have some in-ceiling speakers for Atmos, 6 of them. If you go with that plan, having the subwoofers in the ceiling and visually hidden that way, it opens up all sorts of possibilities there. But the price is something to consider for sure. So out of the alternative options that were mentioned to him, the sort of tall and cylindrical shaped SVS PC4000 subs are about the only ones he thought he might be okay with. But if he were to start with a pair of in-wall subwoofers first, and then later on decide he wants to add a pair of PC4000 cylinder subs, would that be okay doing that kind of mixing and matching? So last part first, if you were talking about the KEF in-wall subwoofers that you had mentioned, then I would not advise trying to mix and match those with a pair of SVS PC4000 cylinder subs later on. They are going to be the type of mismatch where it's like weakest link in the chain. That's definitely going to be those KEF in-wall subs, and everything is sort of limited to those capabilities. You're not really getting the benefit of adding the PC4000s. You'd have to limit them to be in line with, where the in-wall KEF subs top out. Otherwise, you're going to drive those KEF in-wall subs into distortion. But like I say, if you're willing to spend the money, then certainly consider the RBH in-ceiling. They can be in-wall, but in your case, I don't see why you wouldn't opt for the in-ceiling option. If you're going that way. But if that price is too high, and it certainly would be for me, then doing, even a pair of PC4000, they're not going to hit cinema reference levels. 4 of them would be fantastic in here. That's going to keep the price under control. And if you're okay with those looks, and small footprint, especially when the whole room is 30 by 30, they're going to look very small, nice small footprint. And then anybody who is, brushing against them, walking into them, they're a carpet covered cylinder. So nobody's going to knock a knee into these things or anything like that. The thing is, the PC4000, the 4000 series in general from SVS, it's going away. It's on sale, on clearance right now. It's kind of your last chance to get them. So that's another vote against installing the KEF in-wall subs that you considered and then getting PC4000s later. You're not going to be able to. The good news is, though, if you decide to buy some PC4000s right now, they're at basically the lowest price that they've ever been. I would, if you're willing to do 4 of them, basically, like I say, one in each corner of the actual building itself. That'll give you a nice, even, smooth, pressurized bass throughout this whole space, and that could be a really, really good choice there. But the RBH in-ceilings could definitely be an option. And you could go with 2 of them, like the dual 12-inch in-ceiling RBH, basically like right in the middle of the whole front 30 wall span and the middle of the back 30 wall span, so 15 feet in from the side walls. Center them that way. A pair of those up in the ceiling could be a good option here too, if you're willing to pay the price. Should you use 12 gauge or 14 gauge? It should be copper speaker wire, right? Any particular brand that we insist upon? So the distances you're talking about, it's not a gigantic difference in price, so use 12 gauge speaker wire. There's not really much need to go to 10 gauge speaker wire. Somebody out there is going to argue it, but we're talking 30 by 30, not 300 by 300 feet. So 12 gauge speaker wire is perfectly fine. And you do not have to overspend on this stuff. If you want literal broadcast quality cables, that doesn't cost an arm and a leg. Over at Parts Express, I like the Belden speaker wire that they sell. Belden as a brand, they are predominantly in the professional market for broadcast quality cables. So getting some 12 gauge in-wall certified Belden speaker wire from Parts Express is certainly one that I can get behind. You can also get absolutely great in-wall rated speaker wire from Monoprice, and that's about as low as the price is going to get for really good quality, pure copper, in-wall rated speaker wire. So Monoprice or Belden from Parts Express. That's where I'll point you. And then lastly, he is going to need a fairly long HDMI cable to reach his projector. Not a surprise. He's asking, should it be fiber optic? Any particular suggestions? So yeah, you mentioned that you, in your AV receiver choice, want to be right up to date with everything. So I'm going to definitely suggest that you go with an HDMI 2.1 specification cable that can carry 48 gigabits per second. So that's going to be fiber optic for any type of length that you're talking about. I'm guessing you're going to have sort of a 30-foot length going on here. Yeah, you're going to want to go fiber optic. And boy, do I have the perfect solution for you that was just introduced not that long ago. The company Rui Pro, that's RUI Pro. They were actually the first to get their fiber optic HDMI 2.1 ultra high speed HDMI cables fully certified by HDMI LLC. They hold that distinction of being the first to get their fiber optic versions. And they have introduced, perfect for installations, the fiber optic cable itself is just standard data center cable. So it doesn't even literally have to be the one you buy from Rui Pro directly. You can get standard fiber optic data center cable. The cable itself is capable of transmitting up to 100 gigabits per second. But then onto the ends of those fiber optic data center cables, you can attach these HDMI adapter plugs on either end. So this makes it so that, first of all, install a conduit, right? From where your projector is going to be mounted to wherever that AV receiver is going to live, run a conduit. But the good news here is now you can use just regular Smurf tube that any electrician is super familiar with. You don't have to go for the wide diameter stuff for a regular HDMI cable to be able to fit down. You can go with a regular Smurf tube. Any electrician will be happy to pull that for you. And now this nice standard data center cable can be pulled through that conduit, so that if for some reason you ever needed to replace it in the future, you easily can without having to open up the walls. And then Rui Pro has mentioned how these HDMI adapter plugs that go on either end, right now, they have HDMI 2.1 48 gigabit certified adapter HDMI plugs to go on the ends of these fiber optic cables. But there's no particular reason with that 100 gigabit per second limitation on the fiber optic cable itself, that in the future, when HDMI 2.2 is ready with its 96 gigabits per second maximum bandwidth, that you couldn't replace the HDMI adapters on either end of that cable and upgrade the cable that's already been run to HDMI 2.2 if and when we ever actually need some things. So right now on their website, it's showing the standard version is sold out, but you'd want to get the armored version anyway for the in-wall run, and that one is in stock. So yeah, that's an easy recommendation from me for that one. You know what? Tom's not here to stop me, so I think I'm going to carry on and maybe answer one or two more just so we round out the figures a little bit here. Yeah, here we go. Mike asks, what do we make of the lawsuits against TCL and Hisense that allege that some of the QLED TV models that they're marketing over at TCL and Hisense, QLED TVs, either don't have any quantum dots in them, or despite the marketing and specs claims, they have so few quantum dots in them that there isn't enough quantum dot material inside to actually provide the more vivid colors that are promised in the marketing material. Yeah, these, I will not commit to anything definitive on this because I do not know for sure, but I've seen a little bit about this, particularly on the TCL one, which was several months ago first mentioned. There was basically like a third-party chemical analysis of certain TCL TVs. I believe they mentioned the Q651 series, which is not mini LED backlights, but the Q does suggest quantum dots, and they do sell it as a QLED TV. So yeah, there was like a chemical analysis done by a third party, and they didn't find the cadmium and one other chemical compound. They didn't find the levels in their chemical analysis, and from that they concluded that there weren't actually quantum dots. But then TCL released their own data that showed the cadmium levels that were in there. They're like, we have them in there, but then some people came back to like, well, the amount of cadmium is too low for this to actually have as many red and green quantum dots in there to be fully part of the backlight, that they must be using some kind of other traditional LED system, or a yellow phosphor, which is what we did before using quantum dots. To get the red and green part of the spectrum from the natively blue LEDs that are back there. So, I mean, honestly, I don't know. I tend to kind of believe TCL's claim that the Q series TVs that they make do have quantum dots in them. Is there the possibility that they are using a yellow phosphor in combination with quantum dots? I mean, that's not out of the realm of possibility whatsoever. That would allow them to use less quantum dot material. I'm not even sure if that is cheaper, but I assume that's the only reason they would do such a thing. At the end of the day, you got to take the natively blue light, because it's all blue LEDs back there, and turn that into white light for the backlight somehow. So either you have some kind of yellow phosphorescent layer that is producing red and green when it's stimulated by the originally blue light, or you use red and green quantum dots that absorb the blue light that's behind them and then re-emit that energy as longer wavelength, lower energy red and green. One way or another, you're turning blue into white by converting some of that blue light into either yellow, which is a combination of red and green, or individual red and green. Could there be some combination of yellow phosphor and quantum dots? I don't see on a technical level why not. If that does reduce the price, that is a possibility. That could explain why the levels that TCL released are lower than had been expected. If if it was pure quantum dots, no yellow phosphor whatsoever, then they're expecting higher levels of cadmium. So is that misleading? Is it no longer a quantum dot TV? Is it no longer a QLED TV? I mean, legally speaking, how would you make that claim? I mean, if there were literally no quantum dots in there and you were calling it a quantum dot TV, okay, maybe that's misleading. But I don't know. Like I say, I don't know. Nothing's beyond all possibility, I suppose. But I'd sort of wager that anything they do actually call a quantum dot LED TV has some quantum dots in it. And then if that's in combination with the yellow phosphor, personally, I don't think that's like false advertising. There are quantum dots in there. I mean, can anybody with their naked eye actually tell the difference? That seems highly unlikely to me. And then the more recent lawsuit against Hisense, I'm like, it was a 43-inch TV. It was basically the lowest tier that Hisense markets as QLED. And then again, it wasn't like the person noticed the color being lacking or something like that. Again, they found some technical information that suggested from a chemical analysis or something along those lines that the quantum dots either weren't there or there weren't as many of them as would be expected or whatever. Yeah, similar thing. I find it hard to be on the side of the plaintiffs in this instance. This seems a little bit like someone looking for a lawsuit that they can bring against some pretty darn large companies that maybe they're just hoping for a quick settlement. That's my instinctual reaction to it, which is all I can say. But yeah, I don't know enough about the actual details to make definitive statements about either. But Mike asked for what's the reaction? That's my reaction to it. All right, I'm going to finish up here with Brandon for this week. Brandon noticed that RBH's super slim Ultra 1 on-wall speakers are on final clearance now, so they're at the lowest price he's ever seen them. They were typically going for about $400 or $450, and now they're down to $250 each, something along those lines. So he knows that we're generally fans of RBH over here overall. But would that fandom extend specifically to the Ultra 1 super slim on-wall speakers? Right now, he's using Ascend Acoustics CBM 170 SE front speakers and HTM 200 SE surrounds that are mounted on his side walls, and he has no complaints about their sound quality. But the HTM 200 SEs, even though they're reasonably compact, they are about 6 inches in depth. They were easy enough to mount to the wall, but he's got a fairly narrow room. The walkways are along those side walls, and so that 6 inches is protruding out. So he's like, okay, if I could reduce that by actually a little bit more than 4 inches, because those Ultra 1s from RBH are under 2 inches front to back. He's like, hey, that'd be kind of nice if I can save that physical depth, but give up nothing in terms of the sound quality. then he'd be in favor of that, especially at their absolute final clearance prices. So he's like, is that a good idea? Will they match in terms of sound quality? So my experience with the Ultra Ones is that there is no magic. You make a speaker that thin and there is going to be some compromise to the sound quality. That's my instinctual take on it, my reaction to it. And I use the analogy of there are those KEF T series speakers, which are even skinnier than the RBH Ultra Ones. They're about as skinny as speakers get without just being embedded into the wall. But with the T series speakers, Tom and I have recommended those as well in the past. And then some people have come back to us with a bit of criticism of giving that recommendation because they're like, okay, measurement wise, A/B comparison audio wise with your own ears, like the KEF T series speakers are not as neutral as their other full-size speakers. They don't measure as neutral. They got some ups and downs in that frequency response. The clarity isn't as good. The maximum output capability isn't as good. And we're like, yeah, that's physics for you. You make speakers that skinny, you make them sealed and that skinny, and there's going to be some compromises. They are not going to have deep bass extension. I think it is very, very optimistic, the frequency response that RBH has put in their on their site for those Ultra One speakers. My experience is I'd probably be crossing them over at 150 hertz, maybe even a little bit higher. They're not outputting much below 200 hertz, honestly. They're rolling off. They're starting to roll off at 200 hertz. So yeah, pretty darn high crossover frequency, which is not the case with the Ascend HTM 200 SEs. Those can very readily use a 180 hertz. Might be slightly low in some instances, but 100 hertz, no problem for the HTM 200 SEs. The Ultra Ones, I would definitely have a higher crossover frequency. They can't play as loud as the HTM 200 SEs. I don't think they sound as clear. I've always thought that Ascend's tweeters are a true cut above for the price point versus everything else that's out there at that same price point. I think the Ascends have always had better tweeter quality, and that would be same with the RBH Ultra Ones. I don't think the tweeter's as good as the HTM 200 SE tweeters. So, in case you can't tell, I've got some reservations about that. This is a case of if the physical parameters are top priority, well, hey, it is what it is. We're talking under 2 inches in depth versus about 6 inches in depth. But if this is really more about sound quality, I'd lean towards keeping what you have with those HTM 200 SEs. It is going to be a compromise in terms of the sound quality going with the Ultra Ones. We still love RBH. I still actually quite like the RBH Ultra One speakers. Like the KEF T series speakers, there are certain scenarios where there's nothing else that can go there, right? It's a scenario where you can't do an in-wall speaker to save that depth, where nothing else can physically fit. Those are going to be your top 2 choices. Anything else that's even remotely close to them is considerably worse in sound quality versus those 2 options, which is how we've ended up recommending the KEF T series in the past. I'm not going to take the KEF T series and say, these are the equivalent of the best speakers out there. No, I don't believe that to be the case. But when you're like, there's nothing else that can physically fit, is there anything else equally thin that sounds better? That I'm going to say no. That's one of the best choices. The Ultra Ones from RBH are one of the best choices when you have 2 inches and nothing more to fit that space. So that's where I land on those. Alrighty, I'm going to call that a week. I'm going to call that an episode and mention that on our list for next week starting up, we have Yanick, we have Sasi with a series of questions that I did already get back to him via email since they were time sensitive, but they're interesting, so we'll want to go through them. I think Tom will have some things to add there. And that was it for what I wrote up on the list for this week. So Yanick and Sasi, you will be first up next week. And heading back up to the top here, I want to thank our listeners of the week, people who have supported this podcast in some way. Sasi said his name before. We'll say it again because he sent in a lovely PayPal donation. And if you'd like to give a one-time donation to this podcast, PayPal is an easy way to do that. You come to our website, avrant.com, on the desktop version. If you've been viewing it on mobile, switch to the desktop version. That's the only place it shows up. It's over on the right-hand side. It says support AVRant. You click on that. It takes you to PayPal. And you don't have to have a PayPal account. You can just enter credit card information for a one-time donation if you want to do that. But Sasi, thank you very much for doing so this week. and being very generous about it. I didn't see the exact amount, but Tom said you were very generous, so that's super nice of you. If you would like to set up an automatic recurring monthly donation that you don't have to think about, but some money comes from you and most of it comes to Tom and Rob every single month automatically, then you can go to patreon.com/AVRantPodcast to sign up to be an automatic monthly donor. So a big thanks to our 131 patrons who have done just that. Love that financial support. Thank you so much. We want to thank Tim for very kindly offering his PS3 for Tom's brother to use if he wants it. So yeah, it sounds like Tom will not be accepting that offer, but we super duper appreciate that you made it. That's really kind of you to think of that. And then Tom T, not Tom Andrew, different Tom, want to thank you for suggesting that lovely idea of a buy a panel type of fundraiser for Tom. So yeah, we will definitely noodle around with that, and that might be a great thing once Tom has a more concrete idea of what his living situation is going to be. Lastly, want to thank people who sent in notes of gratitude and encouragement. So Raf, Gurinder, Julian, Joshua, Brandon, Yanick, Sasi, Tom, and David. Thank you all very, very much. We super appreciate those notes. They go a long way these days. And a big, big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions. If you want your questions answered by AVRant on this here podcast, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. So, on behalf of Tom Andrew, this has been AVRant. My name is Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.